Hello, and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Damon Sullivan had built everything in his life through meticulous calculation. The sprawling Lakewood estate, the thriving investment firm, even his marriage to Natalie. Each decision made with precision. Their wedding 15 years ago had been the society event of Boston, uniting old money with new ambition. At 42, Damon had the sharp features and confident bearing of a man who commanded respect in boardrooms and social circles alike. His marriage to Natalie had once seemed perfect. She was beautiful, intelligent, and came from a prestigious family. Her mother, Evelyn Pierce, had never approved of Damon despite his success. New money, she'd mutter when she thought he couldn't hear. Not bred for our world. Damon ignored the slights. Success was his revenge against those who thought themselves better by birth alone. His own childhood in a working-class neighborhood of Pittsburgh had taught him that resources were finite, loyalty rare, and betrayal commonplace. "You're working late again?" Natalie's voice carried a hint of accusation as she leaned against his home office doorway. At 38, she remained striking, auburn hair falling in perfect waves, emerald eyes calculating beneath perfectly sculpted brows. "The Hamilton merger won't close itself," Damon replied, without looking up from his laptop. "I thought you had that charity gala tonight." "Canceled. But that's convenient for you, isn't it?" A sarcastic smile played on her lips. Damon finally looked up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." She waved dismissively. "I'll be at my mother's for dinner. Don't wait up." After she left, Damon stared at the wall, contemplating the growing distance between them. His phone buzzed. A text from his younger brother, Trevor. "We need to talk. It's about Natalie. Call me." Damon frowned. Trevor had always been protective, seeing danger where Damon saw opportunity. Still, Trevor's instincts were rarely wrong. He dialed his brother's number. "I debated whether to tell you this," Trevor said without preamble. "Natalie's been meeting with Victor Hargrove regularly." Victor Hargrove, Natalie's colleague at the architectural firm where she was a partner. Harvard-educated, from an established family. Exactly the type of man Evelyn Pierce would approve of for her daughter. "They work together," Damon replied evenly. "They have projects. Not at the Harborview Hotel, they don't," Trevor countered. "I saw them last week. They looked intimate." Something cold settled in Damon's stomach. "I appreciate the concern, but I need evidence before I make accusations. Natalie values her professional relationships." "Your call. Just watch your back." After hanging up, Damon sat motionless. He'd built his fortune by seeing patterns others missed. Now he reviewed the past 6 months. Natalie's late nights, new clothes, sudden interest in privacy, decreasing intimacy. The pattern was forming, but Damon wasn't one to act on suspicion alone. He needed facts. He opened his laptop and created a new folder labeled Contingency. If what he suspected was true, Damon wouldn't just defend himself. He would ensure that those who betrayed him would regret it for the rest of their lives. The next morning, Damon called in a favor from an old client who specialized in digital security. By afternoon, monitoring software had been discreetly installed on their home network. That evening, he suggested a weekend trip to their lake house. "I can't this weekend," Natalie said quickly. "The Westfield project proposal is due Monday." "With Victor?" Damon asked casually. A flicker of something, alarm, crossed her face before she composed herself. "Among others." "Why?" "Just curious about your work. You rarely talk about it anymore." She smiled tightly. "Because you rarely seem interested." That night, lying beside his sleeping wife, Damon made his decision. He would discover the truth, and if his suspicions proved correct, his response would be devastating. Damon Sullivan didn't lose, especially not to those who thought themselves entitled to take what was his. Chapter 2. Shadows and Whispers. The first concrete evidence arrived 3 weeks later. Damon had been simultaneously building his case and observing Natalie's behavior with detached precision. The monitoring software had captured text messages between her and Victor. "V, miss you already. Last night was incredible. And patience. Our time is coming. These suspects nothing. Damon stared at the exchange, feeling strangely calm. The betrayal stung less than the calculation behind it. This wasn't just passion, this was planning. Further investigation revealed more troubling patterns. Natalie had been accessing their joint financial accounts, documenting balances, investment portfolios. She'd recently spoken with their attorney without mentioning it to Damon. It was during a business lunch with Preston Mills, a banking executive and longtime acquaintance, that Damon received unexpected insight. Your wife made quite an impression on the board, Preston mentioned casually over their entrees. Damon maintained his composed expression. Board, the Sullivan Family Foundation. She presented architectural plans for the new community center. With Victor Hargrove. Preston paused. I assumed you knew. The Sullivan Family Foundation was Damon's philanthropic project, his attempt to provide opportunities for underprivileged children like he once was. Natalie had never shown interest in it before. Of course, Damon smiled smoothly. Just curious about your impression. They were very synchronized, Preston replied carefully. Victor mentioned they've been working closely on several projects. His family has substantial connections in development. Later that day, Damon contacted his personal attorney, Samuel Westbrook, a ruthless legal mind he kept separate from the firm that handled his and Natalie's joint matters. I need options, Damon explained after outlining his suspicions. Discreetly, Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, Samuel reminded him. Without a bulletproof prenup, which you don't have, she could get up to half. I'm not concerned about money, Damon replied. I want to understand what they're planning. Samuel leaned forward. You need surveillance. Professional legal surveillance. Damon hired 2 firms, one to monitor Natalie and Victor, another to investigate their electronic communications. He was building a case with the methodical precision that had made him successful in business. Meanwhile, he maintained a perfect facade at home. He brought Natalie flowers, suggested dinners, acted the devoted husband. If she noticed the change, she didn't comment, perhaps attributing it to guilt for his prior neglect. During a dinner party at their home, Damon watched Victor interact with Natalie. The architect was tall, aristocratic, with the easy confidence of generational wealth. Damon observed the subtle glances, the careful distance they maintained, the practiced indifference. Your husband's quite accomplished, Victor said to Natalie when Damon approached them, champagne in hand. The Sullivan investment strategy is legendary. Damon has always been good with money, Natalie replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though some values can't be measured in dollars. Like architectural beauty, Victor added smoothly, or meaningful connections. The conversation dripped with subtext that Damon pretended not to notice. Victor's firm is doing remarkable work with sustainable design, he commented pleasantly. Perhaps we should consider them for the new office building. Victor's expression flickered with surprise before he recovered. I'd be honored to discuss it. Later that evening, after guests departed, Natalie approached Damon in his study. That was unexpected, offering Victor the building project. Damon smiled. He's talented, and you speak highly of him. She studied him carefully. You've been different lately, more attentive. Perhaps I'm realizing what's important. He reached for her hand, felt her momentary hesitation before she let him take it. That night, the surveillance team sent their first comprehensive report. Victor and Natalie had met 3 times that week at a private residence registered to a shell company. Financial traces showed the company linked back to Victor's family holdings. More disturbing was the discovery that Natalie had opened a separate account at Cayman National Bank, with transfers from their joint investment account disguised as charitable donations to organizations that didn't exist. As Damon reviewed the evidence, his phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Looking forward to discussing the building project. Natalie mentioned your anniversary dinner is next week. Perhaps we could meet after? Damon smiled coldly at the screen. Their anniversary dinner. The perfect setting for what he now planned. He texted back, perfect timing. In the darkness of his study, Damon continued assembling the pieces of his counterattack. The anniversary dinner wouldn't just mark 15 years of marriage. It would be the beginning of his calculated retribution. Chapter 3. the gathering storm. 15 years, Evelyn Pierce declared, raising her glass at the private dining room of Luc Bernardin, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. Though I must say, it feels longer. The bar was thinly veiled as humor. Damon smiled politely at his mother-in-law, a woman whose disapproval had been as consistent as her designer wardrobe. Evelyn, at 65, retained a regal bearing and cutting tongue that had made her a formidable presence in Boston society. "Mother," Natalie admonished without conviction, her hand resting possessively on the gift box beside her plate, a framed photograph still wrapped in silver paper. The anniversary dinner had been Damon's suggestion, including inviting Evelyn. The restaurant's private room ensured both intimacy and discretion for what would unfold. Samuel Westbrook had arranged for his associate, Patricia Donovan, to be coincidentally dining at the restaurant, ready to enter when signaled. 15 years is significant, Damon agreed, raising his glass. A time for reflection on the past and clarity about the future. Natalie's smile faltered slightly before she recovered. To clarity, she echoed, a hint of challenge in her eyes. The appetizers arrived. Seared scallops for Natalie, foie gras for Evelyn, steak tartare for Damon. The conversation remained superficial, discussing mutual acquaintances and recent social events. Beneath the pleasantries, Damon noted Natalie checking her phone repeatedly. "Expecting a call?" he asked innocently. "Just monitoring a work situation," she replied smoothly. "The Westfield project has some complications." "With Victor?" Damon inquired, his tone casual. A flash of alarm crossed Natalie's face. "Among others. The whole team is involved." "How dedicated you are," Evelyn commented, her tone approving. "Victor Hargrove comes from excellent stock. His grandfather established half the important buildings in Boston." Speaking of Victor, Damon interjected, he sent his regards. "We're discussing the possibility of his firm designing our new corporate headquarters." Natalie's fork paused midway to her mouth. "You didn't mention that was moving forward. Some opportunities are too valuable to ignore." Damon smiled pleasantly. "But enough about work. I believe it's time for gifts." Natalie visibly relaxed, reaching for the silver-wrapped package beside her. "I had this specially made," she announced, pushing it toward Damon. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a silver frame containing a professional photograph of Natalie and Victor standing before an architectural model. Both were smiling confidently at the camera. "This is from the Westfield presentation," Natalie explained. "I thought you'd appreciate seeing the professional side of my life. Victor has been instrumental in advancing my career." She smirked slightly. "He understands my ambitions. Some men just can't keep up with modern professional women," Evelyn added, her gaze fixed pointedly on Damon. "They're threatened by female success." Damon examined the photograph thoughtfully. The body language between Natalie and Victor told its own story. Standing closer than colleagues would, his hand positioned possessively at the small of her back. "It's revealing," Damon finally said, placing the frame carefully on the table. "Thank you for this insight into your priorities." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Happy anniversary, Natalie. Open it." Natalie's expression softened with anticipation as she accepted the box. Jewelry had always been his standard gift, expensive, impersonal tokens that marked the passage of time. She opened it slowly, then froze. Inside was not jewelry, but a small USB drive. "What is this?" she asked, confusion replacing her expectant smile. "A modern gift for a modern woman," Damon replied evenly. "It contains printed screenshots of your text with Victor detailing your affair, your plans to drain my accounts before filing for divorce." The color drained from Natalie's face. Evelyn's gasp was audible in the suddenly silent room. "I don't know what you're talking about," Natalie attempted, her voice unsteady. "Don't you?" Damon removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. The Cayman account, the falsified charitable donations, the consultations with divorce attorneys, the property in Vermont purchased through Victor's shell company, intended, I believe, as your post-divorce residence. "You've been spying on me?" Natalie hissed, anger replacing shock. "I've been protecting my interests," Damon corrected calmly. Just as you've been advancing yours. At that moment, Patricia Donovan appeared at the entrance to the private dining room. Mr. Sullivan? Is this a good time? Perfect timing, Patricia, Damon replied, gesturing her inside. My wife and mother-in-law were just learning about some legal developments. This is absurd, Evelyn declared, reaching for her purse. Natalie, we're leaving. I wouldn't, Damon advised. Not if you want to avoid public embarrassment. The management is aware of the situation and has been instructed to prevent disruptions. Patricia placed a thick document on the table. The divorce petition, as you requested, Mr. Sullivan, along with the evidence packets for the civil suit against Mr. Hargrove for alienation of affection and the criminal complaints regarding the financial improprieties. Natalie stared at the documents, her composure crumbling. You can't prove anything. Can I? Damon activated his phone, and Victor's voice filled the room from a recorded conversation. Once the accounts are emptied and transferred, he'll have no liquidity to fight you in court. The prenup becomes unenforceable if we can prove emotional abandonment. Your mother's testimony will help establish that pattern. Evelyn's face had gone ashen. Natalie looked trapped, her calculated plan disintegrating before her eyes. You've been played, Natalie, Damon said quietly. While you thought I was oblivious, I was 10 steps ahead. That's the difference between us. You scheme, I strategize. The main course arrived, the server oblivious to the tension as he placed perfectly prepared dishes before them. Damon thanked him politely, then turned back to his wife. Now we have choices, he continued. You can sign my divorce agreement, which allows you to leave with your personal possessions and a modest settlement, or you can fight me and lose everything, including your freedom, given the nature of the financial fraud you've committed. You would send me to prison? Natalie whispered. Without hesitation, Damon confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. The evidence has already been prepared for the district attorney. Patricia is merely waiting for my signal. Tears formed in Natalie's eyes. Whether from fear or rage was unclear. I loved you once, she said bitterly. Perhaps, Damon acknowledged. But love without loyalty is worthless to me. The storm had broken, but this was merely the beginning of Damon's calculated retribution. Victor Hargrove would soon discover that seducing Damon Sullivan's wife was the most catastrophic mistake of his privileged life. Chapter 4, Battlegrounds. Victor Hargrove had always believed his family name was armor enough against life's complications. The morning after Damon's anniversary revelation, that illusion shattered when he arrived at his firm's offices to find the entrance blocked by security guards. Mr. Hargrove, the lead guard approached. I'm afraid you've been temporarily barred from the premises pending an emergency board meeting. What? Victor's aristocratic features contorted with indignation. This is my family's firm. You can't keep me out. The board's orders, sir. Your access has been suspended. Victor's phone buzzed. A text from his father, Montgomery Hargrove. Emergency meeting called. Serious allegations. Come to the house immediately. The Hargrove estate in Beacon Hill had been the family for 5 generations. Montgomery, at 70, remained a powerful figure in Boston's business and social circles. When Victor arrived, he found his father in the study with 2 men he recognized as board members of Hargrove Architectural. What's happening? Victor demanded. Montgomery's expression was granite. Damon Sullivan has presented the board with evidence that you've been misappropriating client funds and diverting them to personal accounts. He's also filed a civil suit against you personally for alienation of affection. Victor paled. That's absurd. He can't prove. He has recordings. Victor, Montgomery interrupted sharply. Of you and Natalie discussing not only your affair, but detailed plans to divert funds from Sullivan's Foundation projects. The board is calling for your resignation, added Harrison Pembroke, the senior board member, in return of all misappropriated funds. This is a setup, Victor insisted. Sullivan is manipulating you because of Natalie. Is Natalie manipulating the banking records too? Montgomery slid several documents across the desk. These transfers came from your authorization codes. Victor stared at the papers in disbelief. The transactions were indeed authorized with his credentials. moving funds from client accounts through a series of shells that eventually connected to the Vermont property and the Cayman account he'd helped Natalie establish. I didn't do this, he insisted, though doubt crept into his voice. Then explain it, Montgomery demanded. Because Sullivan's evidence is compelling enough that the board is considering cooperating with authorities to minimize the firm's liability. Victor's phone buzzed again, Natalie calling. He declined it, suddenly uncertain of everything. Sullivan's orchestrating this, Victor said finally. He's framing me because of Natalie. And what about Natalie? Montgomery asked coldly. Is he orchestrating your affair with a married woman as well? Victor had no answer. Across town, Damon sat in his office, monitoring the cascading consequences of his counteroperation. The first phase, separating Natalie and Victor from their support systems, was proceeding efficiently. Trevor entered with coffee. Natalie's been calling nonstop. Her access to the house has been revoked, her credit cards canceled, and her personal accounts frozen pending investigation. And Victor? Damon inquired. Currently being excommunicated by his father and the Hargrove board. The financial evidence you planted is quite convincing. Damon nodded. How is the Sullivan Foundation board responding? They've called an emergency session for tomorrow. The evidence suggests Victor and Natalie were planning to divert funds from the community center project to their personal accounts. Excellent. Damon sipped his coffee. And the media? Trevor grimaced. That's where it gets messy. Financial Times is already sniffing around rumors of improprieties at Hargrove Architectural. Boston Globe Society reporter called asking about your separation. Feed the financial story, Damon instructed. Decline comment on personal matters. We want to focus on Victor's professional misconduct, not our marital issues. You don't think people will connect the dots? Of course they will. But officially, we maintain that the financial discoveries prompted the marital investigation, not vice versa. Trevor studied his brother. You've orchestrated this like a military campaign. When you hunt predators, you must think like one, Damon replied. Victor and Natalie believe themselves entitled to take what's mine. I'm simply ensuring they understand the cost of that miscalculation. The board meeting tomorrow will result in their removal from all foundation activities and a formal request for criminal investigation, Damon finished. The evidence suggests they plan to divert nearly $2 million intended for underprivileged children. Evidence you manufactured, Trevor noted without judgment. Evidence that tells a compelling story, Damon corrected. One consistent with their actual intentions toward me personally. His phone signaled an incoming call from an unknown number. Damon answered on speaker. Mr. Sullivan. Victor's voice was tightly controlled. We need to talk. Mr. Hargrove. Challenging day. You know exactly what you're doing, Victor hissed. This vendetta. This consequence, Damon interrupted smoothly. There's a distinction. My family name is precisely why you believed yourself untouchable, Damon finished. A miscalculation on your part. Silence stretched between them before Victor spoke again. What do you want? Want? Nothing. This isn't a negotiation, Victor. It's an education. By week's end, your reputation will be in tatters, your professional credentials under investigation, and your family's firm facing potential criminal liability. Your father will sacrifice you to save the Hargrove name. You're destroying lives over an affair, Victor said incredulously. No, Damon's voice hardened. I'm responding proportionally to a calculated attempt to destroy mine. You and Natalie plotted to take everything from me, my assets, my foundation, my reputation. Did you truly believe I would discover your betrayal and simply walk away wounded? This won't bring her back, Victor attempted. Damon laughed coldly. I don't want her back. I want justice, my version of it. Sleep well, Victor. He disconnected the call and turned to Trevor. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Ensure the evidence reaches the district attorney's office by noon. Trevor nodded solemnly. What about Evelyn? She's been making calls to her society friends, spinning the situation. Let her. Evelyn's influence depends on her daughter's marriage to me. As that crumbles, so will her standing. Damon checked his watch. The foundation board meets at 10. I want our security team escorting Natalie from the premises by 10:30. And if she doesn't show, she'll show, Damon said confidently. Natalie still believes she can salvage something from this situation. That misconception ends tomorrow. As night fell over Boston, 3 people lay awake in separate locations, each contemplating how thoroughly their lives had changed in 24 hours. For 2 of them, it was only beginning. Chapter 5. Calculated Moves. The Sullivan Foundation boardroom fell silent as Damon finished presenting the evidence against Natalie and Victor. 10 board members, Boston's elite business and philanthropic leaders, sat in stunned disbelief. These transfers, Dorothy Whitmore, the foundation's treasurer, pointed to the projected financial records. They were authorized using Ms. Sullivan's credentials? And Mr. Hargrove's, Damon confirmed. The audit trail shows they were accessing the system during off hours, gradually establishing the framework for larger diversions timed to coincide with the community center groundbreaking next month. Have you contacted authorities? Asked Benjamin Russo, a prominent banker. Not yet, Damon replied. I wanted the board's direction before proceeding. The double doors opened, and Natalie walked in, composed but pale. All heads turned. I apologize for my tardiness, she said smoothly, moving toward her usual seat. Traffic was. You weren't invited to this meeting, Natalie, Damon interrupted. The board is discussing your removal. Natalie froze, then straightened her shoulders. On what grounds? Dorothy Whitmore swiveled her laptop toward Natalie. These financial records suggest you and Victor Hargrove were preparing to divert foundation funds. We're considering whether to involve law enforcement. That's preposterous, Natalie scoffed, though her voice wavered. Damon is manipulating you because of our marital issues. These transactions occurred from your authorized devices, Benjamin pointed out. Unless you're suggesting someone stole your credentials? Natalie's gaze darted around the room, finding no allies. I demand time to review these allegations with my attorney. Of course, Damon agreed reasonably. The board will reconvene after you've had that opportunity. In the meantime, your foundation access is suspended, and security will escort you from the building. On cue, 2 security officers appeared at the doorway. The humiliation was calculated. Natalie forced to walk past her social peers under escort, her reputation in tatters. As she reached the door, Natalie turned back. This isn't over, Damon. On that, he replied evenly, we agree. After the board meeting adjourned with a unanimous vote to suspend Natalie and refer the matter to authorities, Damon returned to his office, where Samuel Westbrook awaited him. The district attorney has the preliminary evidence package, Samuel reported. They're reviewing it for potential charges. And the Hargrove situation? Imploding beautifully. The firm has announced Victor's leave of absence, pending an internal investigation. 3 major clients have already suspended projects. Damon nodded, satisfied. What's our vulnerability? Minimal. The evidence trail is compelling, but would require extensive forensic investigation to disprove. By then, the damage to their reputations will be irreversible. Samuel hesitated. However, there's a complication. Victor's father is calling in favors from Judge Holloway. Judge Martin Holloway had presided over business cases in Massachusetts for decades, with a reputation for protecting established interests. Expected, Damon acknowledged. That's why we've established multiple fronts. If the criminal charges encounter political resistance, the civil litigation and professional ethics complaints continue. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Sullivan, Evelyn Pierce is demanding to see you. Damon smiled thinly. Send her in. Evelyn swept into the office like a fury, designer handbag clutched like a weapon. You vindictive bastard. You're destroying my daughter's life. Your daughter destroyed her own life, Damon replied calmly. With your encouragement, if I recall your anniversary toast correctly. Samuel discreetly excused himself, closing the door behind him. Natalie made a mistake. Evelyn conceded, changing tactics. But this public humiliation serves no purpose except revenge. It serves justice, Damon corrected. And consequences. What will it take to end this? Evelyn demanded. Money? A quiet divorce. That opportunity existed yesterday. Today, The machinery is in motion. Evelyn's composure cracked. You came from nothing. My daughter gave you social legitimacy. Without the Pierce connection, you'd still be the scholarship boy pretending to belong. Damon's expression hardened. That scholarship boy built a fortune while your family squandered theirs. Natalie married me because your estates were mortgaged to the hilt and your investment portfolio was collapsing. How dare you? I dare because it's true, Damon interrupted. I paid off your debts as a wedding gift to Natalie. The Pierce reputation for wealth has been a facade for years, one I maintained out of respect for my wife. Evelyn paled. What are you saying? I'm saying your social standing depends entirely on my continued financial support that ends with Natalie's divorce. You can't. I already have. The trust that pays your expenses has been dissolved. The mortgage on your Beacon Hill home, which I hold, is now in default. You have 30 days to vacate. Evelyn collapsed into a chair, her aristocratic facade crumbling. You've planned this meticulously. I learned long ago to prepare for betrayal, Damon replied without emotion. It's a lesson your daughter and her lover are now learning as well. What do you want from me? Evelyn whispered. Nothing. Your collateral damage in Natalie's miscalculation. Damon checked his watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the district attorney in 30 minutes. After Evelyn left, Damon stood at his office window, overlooking Boston Harbor. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned, isolating Natalie and Victor, undermining their professional standing, initiating legal consequences. Next came the systematic dismantling of their futures. His phone buzzed with a text from Trevor. Victor attempted to access his offshore accounts. Found them frozen. Damon smiled coldly. The net was tightening. Across town, Victor sat in his attorney's office, facing increasingly dire news. The board has voted to suspend you indefinitely, his lawyer explained. Your father abstained, but the vote was otherwise unanimous. They can't just erase me from my own family's firm, Victor protested. They can when the bylaws specifically allow for removal of any partner under criminal investigation. The lawyer slid a document across the desk. The DA's office has opened a formal inquiry into the foundation transfers. Sullivan is framing me. Perhaps, but he's doing it expertly. The lawyer looked troubled. The evidence trail is comprehensive. Your devices authorize the transfers. Your digital fingerprints are everywhere. Can you fight it? We could try, but I'm more concerned about the civil suit. Sullivan is claiming damages of $50 million for alienation of affection and business interference. Victor blanched. That's absurd. Perhaps, but it will take years to fight, during which your assets will be encumbered by legal holds. The lawyer hesitated. There's more. The Architectural Licensing Board has been notified of potential ethical violations. He's trying to destroy me completely, Victor realized. Effectively, yes. The lawyer studied him. What exactly did you do to this man? Victor had no answer that wouldn't further incriminate him. His phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. We need to meet. Now, the pieces were falling exactly as Damon had calculated. The game was entering its next phase, and his opponents were only beginning to understand the true depths of his strategy. Chapter 6: Sacrificial Pieces. The private room at the back of Carbone's restaurant offered both discretion and security, important considerations as Natalie and Victor met for the first time since their world began collapsing. This is a setup, Victor said immediately, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain, unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes haunted. Sullivan has manufactured evidence against us. Not manufactured, Natalie corrected, her voice hollow. Orchestrated. There's a difference. What are you saying? I've reviewed the financial evidence with my attorney. Those transactions occurred from our devices. Victor, Damon didn't forge documents. He created situations where we actually performed the actions that now incriminate us. That's impossible, Victor insisted. I never authorized transfers from client accounts. Did you ever use my laptop? Enter passwords I gave you. Victor paled, remembering several occasions when Natalie had asked him to log into her foundation account to review architectural plans while she was on calls. He manipulated us, Natalie continued. Every suspicious transfer occurred when we were together, using our credentials, creating a perfect paper trail. Why didn't you see this coming? Victor demanded. You're his wife. And you're supposed to be brilliant, she snapped back. Neither of us recognized what he was capable of. Their conversation was interrupted as Theodore Blackwood, Victor's oldest friend and a partner at Boston's most prestigious law firm, joined them. It's worse than we thought, Theodore announced without preamble. Sullivan didn't just build a case against you both. He systematically neutralized your potential defenses. Judge Holloway has recused himself from all related cases due to a suddenly discovered conflict of interest. What conflict? Victor asked. Sullivan apparently provided significant financing for Holloway's son's business 2 years ago. The timing suggests he was establishing leverage even before he suspected your affair. That's insane, Natalie whispered. It would mean he's been planning this for years. Not planning, Theodore corrected. Preparing. There's a distinction. Sullivan has contingencies for everything. The DA investigating your case? His daughter received a full scholarship to Stanford from a foundation where Sullivan is the primary donor. Your family's banking relationships? Sullivan's firm acquired a controlling interest in Cambridge Trust 6 months ago. He can't have anticipated everything, Victor insisted. Theodore's expression remained grim. He didn't need to. He just needed to control enough variables to limit your options once he made his move. Natalie stared at her half-empty wine glass. What options do we have left? Limited ones, Theodore admitted. Legally, you're both exposed. The evidence trail is comprehensive. Fighting it means years of litigation with uncertain outcomes. My family has influence, Victor began. Your family is distancing themselves, Theodore interrupted. Your father has called a family council to discuss removing you from the Hargrove Trust. Victor looked physically ill. They can't do that. The trust includes a moral turpitude clause. They can and likely will. Natalie's phone buzzed with text. Her face went ashen as she read it. What now? Victor asked. My mother's house is being foreclosed on. Natalie's voice quivered. Apparently Damon holds the mortgage through a subsidiary. He's called in the loan. Theodore spread his hands. This is his strategy, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously, creating too many fires for you to extinguish. There must be a way to negotiate, Natalie insisted. Everyone has a price. Sullivan doesn't want money, Theodore pointed out. He wants consequences. The restaurant's owner appeared at their table, looking uncomfortable. Miss Sullivan, there are reporters outside asking about you and Mr. Hargrove. Someone tipped them off that you're here. Damon, Natalie whispered. I'll handle it, Theodore assured them, stepping outside. Left alone, Victor and Natalie faced the ruins of their plans. What had begun as attraction had evolved into ambition. Natalie seeking escape from a marriage that had become a business arrangement. Victor seeing opportunity in aligning with the Pierce family name while appropriating Sullivan's connections. We underestimated him, Victor finally admitted. No, Natalie countered, a chill in her voice. Underestimated him. You never knew what he was capable of. Theodore returned, his expression even more troubled. The Boston Globe is running a story tomorrow on financial improprieties at the Sullivan Foundation, naming you both as subjects of investigation. 3 other outlets have confirmed similar stories. How is this happening so fast? Victor demanded. Because Sullivan already had the evidence packaged and ready, Theodore explained. He was just waiting for the right moment to release it. Can you stop it? Natalie asked desperately. Not all of it. Not in time. Theodore hesitated. There's one other option, but you won't like it. What? Separation. If you both publicly disavow each other, claim the affair was a mistake and the financial issues a misunderstanding, there's a chance to mitigate some damage. You want us to turn on each other? Victor asked incredulously. I want you to recognize the reality, Theodore replied bluntly. Together, you're an easy target. Separately, each of you might salvage something. Natalie studied Victor thoughtfully. Theodore's right. United, we fall. Divided, we might survive. You can't be serious, Victor protested. Deadly serious, Natalie's voice hardened. Damon is systematically destroying everything we care about. Our only chance is to change the narrative. By abandoning each other, Victor concluded bitterly. By adapting, Natalie corrected. Isn't that what survivors do? As their debate continued, Damon sat in his office reviewing Theodore Blackwood's text updates. Theodore had been in Damon's employ for months, assigned to represent Victor's interests while actually reporting every detail to Damon. Meeting proceeding as expected. They're considering separation strategy. Damon smiled coldly. Even their attempts at counter-strategy were following his anticipated pathways. The carefully orchestrated media leaks, the foreclosure notice, the trust challenge, each applying pressure from different directions, forcing his targets into predictable responses. The reporters have surrounded Carbones, Trevor reported, entering the office. Natalie and Victor are effectively trapped inside, unless they want to face cameras. Excellent. And the DA? Moving forward with the investigation. The evidence is too compelling to ignore, even with political pressure. Damon nodded, satisfied. What about Plan B? In motion. If the criminal charges falter, the SEC investigation is ready. Victor's firm has multiple regulatory vulnerabilities we can exploit. Good. Damon stared thoughtfully at the chessboard on his desk, where a complex endgame was developing. They'll try to separate their fates now. Natalie will attempt to portray herself as a victim of Victor's manipulation. Will that work? Trevor asked. It doesn't matter. The pieces are already in motion. Damon moved a bishop, capturing a knight. Checkmate in 3 moves. As knight fell over Boston, the consequences continued to cascade. Victor emerged from Carbones to face a gauntlet of reporters shouting questions about financial fraud and professional misconduct. Natalie slipped out the back, only to find Evelyn waiting in a taxi, tears streaming down her aristocratic face. We're ruined, Evelyn whispered as Natalie entered the cab. Everything is gone. Not everything, Natalie replied, a hardness entering her voice. Not yet. She made a decision then, one born of desperation and survival instinct. If Damon wanted war, she would give him one, even if it meant sacrificing Victor and everything they planned together. The game had evolved, but Damon had anticipated this move as well. The battle was entering its final phase, with pieces being sacrificed across the board as the endgame approached. Chapter 7. Desperate Measures. The Hampshire house overlooked Boston Common, its elegant walls having witnessed generations of the city's power dynamics. In a private suite, Natalie sat across from Bradford Kensington, managing partner of Kensington, Marsh & Porter, the most aggressive divorce firm in Massachusetts. Damon has outmaneuvered us at every turn, Natalie admitted, her composure cracking. He's frozen my assets, destroyed my reputation, and is pushing for criminal charges. Kensington studied her file critically. Your position is precarious. The financial evidence is damning. Even if you avoid criminal prosecution, the civil liability could follow you for decades. I need options, Natalie insisted. There must be something we can use against him. Mr. Sullivan appears to have insulated himself remarkably well, Kensington observed. He's maintained a pristine paper trail while documenting your indiscretions meticulously. Everyone has secrets, Natalie countered. Damon built his fortune rapidly. There must be irregularities. Perhaps, but finding them would require resources you no longer have. Natalie's eyes hardened. What if I could provide information about Sullivan Investment Group's trading patterns? Data suggesting potential insider activities. Kensington's interest visibly sharpened. That would change the equation. But do you have such evidence? Not yet, Natalie admitted. But I know where to look. After leaving Kensington's office, Natalie made 2 calls. The first to her former assistant at the architectural firm, who still had access to the Sullivan Foundation servers. The second to an old college friend now working at the SEC. Meanwhile, Victor faced his own desperate scenario. The Hargrove Family Council had voted to suspend his access to trust distributions pending resolution of the allegations. His personal accounts were encumbered by legal holds. His professional reputation was in tatters. The licensing board has scheduled a hearing, his attorney informed him. They're considering emergency suspension of your architectural credentials. Based on what? Victor demanded. No charges have been filed. Based on the evidence presented by the Sullivan Foundation. The standards for professional ethics proceedings are lower than criminal court. Victor paced his rented apartment, a far cry from his Beacon Hill townhouse, which had been secured by Sullivan's attorneys as potential compensation for civil damages. What if I cooperate with authorities? Victor asked suddenly. Provide information about Natalie's role in exchange for leniency? The attorney looked troubled. You be confirming wrongdoing. Lesser wrongdoing, Victor clarified. I could position myself as manipulated by Natalie. She had access to the foundation's finances. She initiated our relationship. Throwing Miss Sullivan under the bus might help, but it doesn't explain your participation. What if I had evidence of other improprieties? Things involving Sullivan himself. Do you have such evidence? Victor hesitated. Not yet, but Natalie mentioned concerns about Sullivan Investment Group's trading practices. If we could show Damon has his own secrets. Across town, Damon reviewed security alerts indicating unauthorized access attempts on the Sullivan Investment Group's secure servers. Natalie's digital fingerprints? He asked Roland Chun, his head of cybersecurity. Not directly, Roland replied. The attempts came through Foundation systems using her old assistant's credentials. We tracked it to a coffee shop near Hampshire House. Damon smiled coldly. Desperation makes people predictable. Any real vulnerability? None. The honeypot servers activated as designed. They accessed only what we wanted them to see. Trevor entered with a report from their private investigator. Natalie met with Bradford Kensington this morning. Victor has approached the DA about a potential cooperation agreement. Right on schedule, Damon noted, checking his watch. They're looking for leverage, believing their only hope is finding something they can use against me. Will they find anything? Trevor asked. Only what I want them to find. Damon indicated the monitor showing access logs. They're currently downloading trading records that appear to show pattern irregularities. Records I created specifically for this scenario. You anticipated they'd look for insider trading evidence. I anticipated they'd seek any vulnerability to exploit. Financial impropriety is the obvious choice. Damon turned to Roland. How long until they discover the fabricated Jenkins merger documents? Based on their search patterns, within the hour. Damon nodded, satisfied. And the real SEC investigation? Proceeding as arranged, Trevor confirmed. The evidence you provided about Hargrove Architectural's foreign financial arrangements has their full attention. The carefully constructed web continued to tighten. While Natalie and Victor desperately sought leverage, Damon had already positioned their very attempts as additional evidence against them. Their unauthorized server access was being logged and documented, creating yet another layer of legal jeopardy. That evening, Victor received an encrypted message from Natalie. Found something. Trading irregularities in Sullivan Investment Group. Possible Jenkins merger insider information. Meeting my SEC contact tomorrow. Victor's hopes rose for the first time in weeks. He replied immediately. Need to meet tonight. My place. 8 p.m. What Victor didn't know was that his encrypted messaging app had been compromised weeks earlier. Damon read their exchange in real time, each desperate move confirming his psychological profile of his opponents. They've found the bait, he informed Samuel Westbrook. Schedule the SEC interview for tomorrow afternoon. I want agents waiting when Natalie arrives with her evidence. Entrapment, Samuel questioned. Justice, Damon corrected. They're attempting to fabricate evidence against me using illegally accessed confidential documents. The SEC will be very interested in that fact. As night fell, Natalie arrived at Victor's apartment, clutching a flash drive containing what she believed was damning evidence against Damon. These trading patterns showed Sullivan Investment Group positioned heavily before the Jenkins announcement, she explained, showing Victor the documents. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. Will it be enough? Victor asked. Combined with testimony about Damon's controlling behavior and emotional manipulation, it creates reasonable doubt about the Foundation allegations. Natalie's eyes gleamed with renewed hope. We can argue he fabricated evidence against us as revenge. My attorney thinks I should distance myself from you, Victor admitted. Natalie's expression hardened. That would be a mistake. United, we have a chance. Divided, he'll destroy us individually. Neither realized that their conversation was being recorded, their desperate strategizing becoming additional evidence of conspiracy. The trap Damon had set months earlier was closing, with his targets maneuvering precisely as he had anticipated. The next morning, Damon met with the district attorney, providing final documentation of the foundation financial improprieties. The case is solid, the DA confirmed. Grand jury indictments should come through by week's end. And the SEC matter? Damon inquired. Coordinated as requested. If they present the fabricated trading records, they'll face additional federal charges for market manipulation attempts. Damon nodded, satisfied. They'll be meeting their supposed SEC contact at 2 o'clock. Agents will be waiting, the DA confirmed. This is quite the web you've woven, Damon. Justice requires thoroughness, Damon replied without emotion. They plan to destroy everything I've built. I'm simply ensuring appropriate consequences. As Damon left the DA's office, he received confirmation that the final piece had fallen into place. The Sullivan Foundation Board had voted unanimously to pursue maximum criminal and civil remedies against Natalie and Victor. The endgame was approaching. All pieces were positioned exactly as Damon had calculated months earlier when he first discovered Natalie's betrayal. What had begun as a marriage was ending as a masterclass in strategic retribution. Chapter 8: The Sacrifice. The federal building's interview room felt unnaturally cold as Natalie and Victor sat across from two stone-faced SEC investigators. What they had expected to be a confidential meeting to present evidence against Damon had instantly transformed into their own interrogation. "These documents you've provided," Agent Larson began, holding up the flash drive. "Where did you obtain them?" "From Sullivan Investment Group servers," Natalie replied cautiously. "I had legitimate access as Damon's wife." "Our information indicates otherwise," Agent Pearson countered. "Server logs show unauthorized access using compromised credentials. That's a federal offense under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." Victor and Natalie exchanged alarmed glances. Furthermore, Larson continued, "Preliminary analysis indicates these trading records have been altered. Attempting to fabricate evidence of securities fraud is itself a serious crime." "That's absurd," Victor protested. "We found these records exactly as they are. In a secured server area you accessed illegally," Pearson noted, "while already under investigation for financial crimes." The door opened, and Damon entered with a man Natalie recognized as the SEC's regional director. "Mr. Sullivan has been cooperating with our office on several matters," the director explained, "including monitoring unauthorized access attempts to his company's servers." This was a setup, Natalie realized, her voice hollow. "This was consequence," Damon corrected calmly. "You attempted to fabricate evidence against me to escape your own legal jeopardy. That decision has now compounded your problems significantly." Victor stood abruptly. "You manipulated everything from the beginning." "I protected myself," Damon replied without emotion. "There's a distinction." The SEC director cleared his throat. "Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Hargrove, based on the evidence before us, we're preparing charges related to attempted securities fraud, unauthorized computer access, and conspiracy." As the reality of their situation became clear, Natalie made a desperate calculation. "I want to cooperate," she announced suddenly. "Victor masterminded everything. The affair, the foundation theft, this evidence tampering. I was coerced." Victor stared at her in disbelief. "You betray me now?" "I'm saving myself," Natalie replied coldly. "Someone has to survive this." The perfect unity they had presented crumbled instantly under pressure, exactly as Damon had predicted. He watched dispassionately as they turned on each other, accusations flying, each attempting to minimize their own culpability by maximizing the others. After 30 minutes of this spectacle, Damon quietly excused himself. In the hallway, Samuel Westbrook awaited with an update. "The grand jury has returned indictments on the foundation charges," Samuel reported. "Arrest warrants are being processed. And the Hargrove firm? The board has voted to remove Victor permanently and change the company name." 3 generations of Hargrove legacy erased in a week. Damon nodded, satisfied. What about Evelyn? Foreclosure proceedings are advancing. She'll be removed from the Beacon Hill property within 10 days. The systematic dismantling of his opponent's lives was proceeding exactly as designed. While Natalie and Victor fought over the scraps of their remaining credibility, Damon had already moved to the next phase of his strategy. Later that evening, as Damon reviewed final documentation in his study, Trevor arrived with unexpected news. Natalie's agreed to testify against Victor in exchange for reduced charges, he reported. She's claiming he manipulated her from the beginning, using their relationship to access foundation finances. And Victor, offering similar cooperation against Natalie. The DA is playing them against each other. Damon smiled thinly. Their loyalty dissolved exactly when predicted. Trevor studied his brother. This vendetta, it's more thorough than I expected. It's not vendetta, Damon corrected. It's justice. They conspired to take everything from me, my company, my foundation, my reputation. Actions have consequences. The foundation will recover. Already has. The board has approved restructuring that removes any trace of Natalie's involvement. The community center project breaks ground next month as scheduled. Trevor hesitated. There's one more thing. Victor attempted suicide in federal custody. For the first time, Damon's composed expression faltered slightly. Is he dead? No. Guards intervened in time. He's under psychiatric hold. Damon was silent for a moment, then arrange appropriate medical care. Anonymous donor. You're helping him? Trevor asked, surprised. I'm ensuring he survives to face justice, Damon clarified. Death would be escape. The next morning, Damon received notification that Natalie had accepted a plea agreement. 5 years imprisonment for financial fraud, with testimony against Victor as part of the deal. In exchange, the SEC charges would be handled as part of the same case, rather than as separate federal counts. Victor, meanwhile, had been released to a psychiatric facility, his legal team now arguing diminished capacity, a strategy Damon had anticipated months earlier. The chess game was entering its final moves. All major pieces had been captured or neutralized. What remained was ensuring the endgame proceeded exactly as Damon had designed. That afternoon, he visited the construction site of the Sullivan Foundation's Community Center in South Boston, a project that would provide educational resources and opportunities for underprivileged children. As he surveyed the foundation being laid, Samuel joined him with final legal updates. Natalie's formal sentencing is scheduled for next week, Samuel reported. Victor's competency hearing is the following day. And the civil matters? Proceeding as planned. The courts have approved asset freezes on all their accounts. Evelyn's eviction is scheduled for Monday. Damon nodded, his gaze fixed on the construction. Ensure the media coverage is appropriate. I want the foundation's mission highlighted, not the scandal. Of course, the narrative is already shifting. You, as the victim who maintained focus on charitable work despite personal betrayal. As they walked the perimeter of what would become classrooms and computer labs, Damon reflected on the precision of his response. What Natalie and Victor had failed to understand was that his calculating nature wasn't just a business strategy. It was his fundamental approach to life. Was it worth it? Samuel asked suddenly. The marriage, knowing how it ended? Damon considered the question seriously. Every experience provides value if properly analyzed. I learned important lessons about trust, verification, and consequence. But the personal cost was anticipated and accepted, Damon finished. Nothing of value comes without risk. The mistake is failing to prepare for potential losses. As sunset painted the Boston skyline in amber hues, Damon returned to his office for a final review of the settlement documents. Everything was proceeding according to design. The pieces he had positioned months earlier were delivering exactly the outcome he had calculated. Justice, in Damon Sullivan's world, was not an abstract concept, but a precise mathematical equation, one he had solved with devastating accuracy. Chapter 9. Checkmate. 1 year later, Damon stood at the podium of the newly completed Sullivan Community Center, addressing Boston's elite gathered for the grand opening. The building, a stunning architectural achievement with sweeping glass walls and innovative sustainable design, represented the foundation's largest investment to date. Today marks not just the opening of a building, Damon told the assembled crowd, but the beginning of opportunity for thousands of children who might otherwise be overlooked by society. Every child deserves the chance to rise beyond their circumstances. In the audience, Trevor watched proudly as his brother spoke with genuine passion about creating pathways out of poverty. The center would provide academic support, technology access, mentorship, and scholarships, a comprehensive approach to breaking cycles of disadvantage. What went unmentioned was the dramatic fallout that had occurred since the anniversary dinner that had sparked such devastation. The story had dominated Boston's social circles for months before gradually fading from public consciousness. Natalie was serving her sentence at the Federal Women's Facility in Danbury, Connecticut. Her testimony had indeed helped secure Victor's conviction, though not with the results she had hoped. Rather than receiving leniency, the judge had been particularly harsh, citing her betrayal of philanthropic principles and breach of fiduciary duty. Victor had been declared competent to stand trial despite his attorney's efforts. Found guilty on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy, he was currently serving 7 years at a medium-security federal prison. The Hargrove family had legally changed their architectural firm's name, erasing Victor's connection to the generations-old business. His father had died 3 months after the conviction, with many suggesting the disgrace had accelerated his decline. Evelyn Pierce had been forced to leave Boston entirely, her social standing destroyed by the scandal and her financial security obliterated by Damon's systematic dismantling of the supports he had quietly provided for years. She now lived in a modest apartment in Providence, Rhode Island, largely ostracized by the social circles that had once embraced her. The foundation itself had emerged stronger after a brief period of scrutiny. Damon's transparent cooperation with authorities and immediate implementation of enhanced financial controls had restored confidence. Major donors had increased their contributions, impressed by his resilience and unwavering commitment to the mission despite personal betrayal. After the ceremony, as guests toured the new facility, Bradford Kensington, who had briefly represented Natalie before withdrawing, approached Damon. "Remarkable recovery," Kensington commented, gesturing around the impressive space. Few expected the foundation to survive the scandal so robustly. "People underestimate the power of systematic planning," Damon replied evenly. "Indeed," Kensington studied him curiously. "I've represented many high-net-worth individuals in contentious divorces, but never encountered anyone who executed such comprehensive consequences." "Justice requires precision," Damon said simply. "Justice or revenge?" Kensington challenged. "Is there a meaningful distinction when the outcome is proportional to the offense?" Before Kensington could respond, they were interrupted by Charlotte Westlake, the foundation's new executive director, a brilliant administrator with impeccable credentials whom Damon had recruited from Harvard's education department. "The mayor would like a private word," Charlotte informed Damon, who excused himself from Kensington with a cordial nod. Later that evening, Damon sat alone in his study at the Lakewood estate, reviewing the day's events while classical music played softly in the background. The house felt different now, cleansed of deception, though emptier. He had considered selling it, but ultimately decided against erasing his own history. Lessons required remembrance. Trevor entered with coffee and updates on their latest investment ventures. The Sullivan Investment Group had thrived in the past year, its reputation for ethical practice enhanced by Damon's handling of the foundation crisis. "I saw Kensington speaking with you," Trevor noted. "Still trying to understand how you orchestrated everything?" "People find it difficult to grasp comprehensive strategic thinking," Damon replied. "They look for simple motivations, greed, passion, revenge. They rarely recognize the mathematical elegance of properly executed consequence." "Have you heard from Natalie?" Her attorney contacted Samuel about potential appeal strategies. "Nothing viable." Trevor hesitated. "And you're certain about never considering reconciliation?" "People make mistakes." Damon's expression hardened. Betrayal isn't a mistake. It's a choice, a series of calculated decisions made with full awareness of potential harm. Forgiveness might be spiritually admirable, but it's strategically unsound. Some might call that harsh. Some haven't built themselves from nothing, learning exactly how fragile trust is and how devastating its breach can be. Damon sipped his coffee. I don't expect universal understanding of my principles. I expect respect for their consistency. As Trevor left, Damon moved to the window overlooking the lake that gave the estate its name. The water was calm tonight, reflecting moonlight in perfect symmetry. He found the parallel appropriate, his external composure mirroring the absolute stillness of his resolved conviction. The anniversary dinner confrontation had been merely the visible manifestation of a strategy already months in execution. While Natalie and Victor had been planning their betrayal, Damon had been constructing their downfall with the same methodical precision that had built his fortune. His phone buzzed with a notification, a news alert about Victor Hargrove being denied his first parole hearing. Another piece moving exactly as calculated. Some would call his response excessive, but those people hadn't built themselves from nothing, learning painful lessons about loyalty and betrayal along the way. Damon had simply applied the principles that governed his professional success to a personal violation: thorough analysis, strategic planning, and decisive execution. The chess metaphor was apt, but incomplete. In chess, the goal was to capture the king. In Damon's calculation, the goal was to ensure that those who attempted to destroy him would face the full mathematical consequence of their actions. Not just defeat, but comprehensive justice. As he closed the portfolio containing the day's events, Damon reflected on the truth few understood. In a game of consequence, the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one who shouted threats or made dramatic gestures. It was the one who quietly calculated every move, anticipated every counter, and executed with precision while opponents still believed the game had barely begun. Checkmate wasn't just the end. It was inevitable from the first move, if you knew how to calculate the board correctly. Damon Sullivan did, and that made all the difference. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Impossible Call. Joshua Horn was reviewing security protocols for his latest corporate client when his phone shattered the afternoon silence. The caller ID showed St. Mary's Medical Center, a hospital he'd never set foot in. Mr. Horn, the voice was gravelly, tired. This is Dr. Raymond Sims. I'm afraid I have terrible news about your son. Joshua's grip tightened on the phone. I'm sorry, doctor, but there's been a mistake. I don't have a son. Sir, please don't make this more difficult than it already is. Dr. Sims sounded impatient, almost rehearsed. Your son Tyler Horn was brought in 3 hours ago after a motorcycle accident. We tried everything, but his injuries were too severe. I need you to come down and sign the death certificate. Listen carefully, Joshua said, his military training kicking in. I don't have a son named Tyler or any other name. I've never been married before my current wife, and we don't have children. You've got the wrong person. Mr. Horn, your son had your emergency contact information in his wallet. Your address, your phone number. We've confirmed your identity through his medical records. Please, just come down to room 302. We need to handle this quickly due to state regulations. The line went dead. Joshua stared at his phone, mind racing. 15 years in military intelligence had taught him to trust his instincts, and every alarm bell in his head was screaming. Someone was playing a game, and he was the unwilling participant. But curiosity had always been both his strength and his weakness. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, texting his wife Melissa, going to check something at the hospital. Back soon. Her response came quickly. Everything okay? Red heart. Just a misunderstanding. Love you. The drive to St. Mary's took 20 minutes through downtown traffic. Joshua used the time to think. Who could possibly have enough information about him to create a fake emergency contact? His security consulting firm had made him enemies, corporate executives he'd exposed for data breaches, employees he'd caught selling secrets. But this felt more personal. St. Mary's Medical Center was a sprawling complex that looked like it had seen better decades. Joshua parked and made his way through the maze of corridors to the third floor. Room 302 was at the end of a dimly lit hallway. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The body in the bed was that of a young man, maybe 19 or 20, with sandy brown hair and sharp features. But what made Joshua's blood run cold wasn't the stranger's face. It was the wedding ring on the supposed victim's finger. A ring identical to his own, down to the custom engraving on the inside. Imanje forever. Mr. Horn. Dr. Sims appeared behind him, clipboard in hand. He was a thin man with nervous eyes and hands that shook slightly. I know this is difficult, but we need to handle the paperwork. Joshua studied the doctor carefully. How did you say my son died? Motorcycle accident on Highway 95. He was speeding, lost control around a curve. The bike burst into flames, but we managed to pull him out. He died en route to the hospital. Strange, Joshua said, moving closer to the bed. He doesn't look burned. Dr. Sims shifted uncomfortably. The paramedics got to him quickly. Most of the damage was internal, massive head trauma. Joshua nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket. Dr. Sims flinched, but Joshua only pulled out his phone. Mind if I take a photo? For insurance purposes. That's not really protocol. Neither is calling someone about a child that isn't theirs. Joshua's voice carried the edge he'd perfected interrogating terrorists in Afghanistan. Unless you can explain how this young man has my exact wedding ring. The doctor's face went white. There must be some mistake. Yes, there is. Joshua stepped closer, and Dr. Sims backed toward the door. The mistake was thinking I'd be stupid enough to fall for this. Who put you up to this? Who's paying you to play dead son with a stranger's corpse? I don't know what you're talking about, Dr. Sims stammered. You need to sign these papers, and... Actually, I think I'll call the police instead. Joshua pulled out his phone. Let them sort out why someone is trying to establish a fake parental relationship between me and a corpse. That's identity fraud at minimum, probably part of something much bigger. Dr. Sims dropped the clipboard and bolted from the room. Joshua didn't chase him. Instead, he carefully photographed everything: the body, the wedding ring, the medical charts clipped to the bed. Then he called his friend Detective Pablo Finley with the Metro PD. Pablo, it's Josh. I need you to run a check on a Dr. Raymond Sims at St. Mary's Medical Center. And I need it fast. What's going on, brother? Someone just tried to convince me I have a dead son. Either this is the world's most elaborate prank, or someone setting me up for something big. After hanging up, Joshua took one more look at the body. The young man was definitely dead, probably had been for hours based on the lividity. But this wasn't about a motorcycle accident. This was about someone wanting Joshua Horn to be officially connected to a corpse. The question was why. As he left the hospital, Joshua noticed a black sedan in the parking lot with tinted windows. The engine was running, but no one got out. He memorized the license plate and made a mental note to have it traced. Someone was watching him, which meant whatever this was, it was just beginning. Chapter 2. Threads of Deception. Pablo Finley's call came at 6 a.m. the next morning. Josh, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner in 20 minutes? What did you find on Dr. Sims? Not over the phone. Just get here. Murphy's Diner was a cop hangout on the outskirts of downtown. The kind of place where conversation stayed private and the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. Pablo was already in a corner booth, his detective shield visible on his belt, looking like he hadn't slept. Raymond Sims isn't a doctor, Pablo said without preamble. Hell, he isn't even Raymond Sims. Real name is Ernie Randall, small-time con artist with a sheet going back 15 years. Fraud, identity theft, check kiting, never anything violent, but he's good at playing roles. Joshua slid into the opposite booth. Someone hired him to play doctor? Gets better. I ran that license plate you gave me. The sedan belongs to a rental company. leased to a corporation called Farrell Holdings. CEO is a guy named Vernon Farrell. The name meant nothing to Joshua, but Pablo's expression suggested it should. Never heard of him. Farrell's interesting. 42 years old, no criminal record, but his business ventures all have one thing in common. They target successful men going through divorces. He swoops in, befriends the wife, helps her get the best lawyers, usually ends up with a piece of the settlement. And sometimes he ends up with the wife. You're saying he's a professional homewrecker? I'm saying he's smart about it. Never anything prosecutable, just a pattern of broken marriages and transferred assets. His current target seems to be someone close to you. Joshua felt ice forming in his chest. Melissa. Pablo nodded grimly. I did some digging after you called. Your wife has been meeting with Vernon Farrell for 3 weeks. Coffee dates, lunch meetings, evening drinks. Always when you're working late. The betrayal hit harder than any physical blow Joshua had ever taken. 3 weeks. Melissa had been planning something for 3 weeks, and he'd been completely blind to it. There's more, Pablo continued. I checked the John Doe from yesterday. The kid in room 302. His real name was Tyler Farrell. Vernon's son from a previous relationship. His own son. Joshua's military mind was already processing the implications. He killed his own child to set me up. Kid died 2 days ago in a motorcycle accident, exactly like Dr. Sims described. But it happened in Nevada, not here. Vernon had the body transported and paid Randall to play his little scene with you. But why? What's the endgame? Pablo pulled out a manila folder. That's where it gets really twisted. Farrell's been building a case that you're Tyler's biological father. Fake DNA tests, forged medical records, backdated birth certificates. If you had signed those death papers yesterday, you would have legally acknowledged paternity of his dead son, setting me up for a wrongful death lawsuit. Bigger than that. Once he established you as Tyler's father, he could claim you abandoned the kid, never paid child support, were negligent in your parental duties. He'd have civil grounds to go after everything you own. And with Melissa as his inside source on your assets. Joshua's hands clenched into fists. Vernon Farrell wasn't just stealing his wife. He was trying to steal his entire life. The elaborate hospital setup was just the opening move in a long-term con designed to destroy everything Joshua had built. How long do I have before they make their next move? Based on his previous targets? Not long. Farrell likes to work fast once the pieces are in place. Days, maybe a week. Joshua stood up, his mind already formulating a plan. Pablo, I need you to do something for me, and it has to stay off the books. What do you need? I want you to arrest Ernie Randall for fraud and impersonating a medical professional. But don't book him right away. Give me 30 minutes with him first. Josh, I can't let you. I'm not going to hurt him. I just need information, and he'll talk faster to me than to you. You know I'm good at getting people to talk. Pablo studied his friend's face. They'd served together in Afghanistan, and he'd seen Joshua extract information from hardened terrorists using nothing but psychological pressure and strategic silence. 30 minutes. After that, he goes into the system. That's all I need. By noon, Joshua had the full scope of Vernon Farrell's operation. Randall had been surprisingly cooperative once he realized he was facing serious jail time for medical fraud. Farrell had been planning this con for 6 months, ever since he'd identified Melissa Horn as the wife of a successful security consultant with significant assets and no children. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: destroy Joshua's reputation and finances through fraudulent lawsuits, while simultaneously positioning himself as Melissa's protector and new love interest. Once Joshua was financially ruined and emotionally devastated, Vernon would marry Melissa and gain control of whatever assets remained. But Vernon had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his target. Joshua Horn wasn't some suburban husband who would crumble under pressure. He was a former military intelligence officer who specialized in psychological warfare and strategic planning. And now that he knew the game being played, he was going to play it better. The first step was confirmation. He needed to see Vernon and Melissa together, needed to watch their interactions and understand the depth of his wife's betrayal. It would hurt, but pain was just information, and information was power. He drove to Melissa's favorite restaurant, a trendy bistro downtown where she often had lunch with her book club friends. Sure enough, her car was in the parking lot, and sitting across from her at a window table was a handsome man with salt and pepper hair and an expensive suit. Vernon Farrell looked exactly like what he was, a predator dressed as a gentleman. Joshua watched from his car as Melissa laughed at something Vernon said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her wedding ring, the one that matched the ring on his dead son's finger, caught the sunlight. His phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Book club is running long today. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. The lie was so casual, so practiced, that Joshua wondered how many others there had been. He took photos of them together, documenting their body language, their obvious intimacy. Evidence for later. Then he drove home to plan his counterattack. Vernon Farrell wanted to play games with a dead son and a cheating wife? Fine. But Joshua was going to change the rules. Chapter 3. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. That evening, Joshua sat in his home office staring at 3 computer screens filled with information about Vernon Farrell. His military intelligence training had taught him that knowledge was the ultimate weapon, and he was building an arsenal. Vernon Farrell, age 42, born in Detroit. Parents died in a car crash when he was 16. Bounced between foster homes until he aged out of the system. No college degree, but highly intelligent with a gift for reading people and exploiting weaknesses. His business success came from carefully orchestrated cons targeting wealthy divorcees. What made Vernon dangerous wasn't his criminal intent, it was his patience. He spent months studying his targets, learning their habits, their vulnerabilities, their loved ones. By the time he made his move, he knew his victims better than they knew themselves. But Vernon had made a critical error in targeting Joshua Horn. Military intelligence officers were trained to spot deception, to see patterns in chaos, to think 10 moves ahead. And Joshua had spent 15 years honing those skills against enemies far more dangerous than a mid-level con artist. Working late again? Melissa's voice from the doorway made him jump. She was wearing the blue dress he'd bought her for their anniversary, the one she claimed was her favorite. Just finishing up some client reports. He minimized the screens and turned to face her. How was book club? Oh, you know how it is. We spent more time gossiping than discussing the actual book. Her smile was perfect, practiced. Sarah's getting divorced, and Monica's thinking about leaving her husband. Sometimes I wonder if any marriages actually work anymore. The casual cruelty of the comment hit him like a physical blow. She was talking about destroying other people's marriages while actively betraying her own. What do you think makes marriages fail? He asked, studying her face. I think people grow apart. They stop communicating, stop trying to understand each other. And sometimes, she paused, looking out the window. Sometimes someone comes along who makes you remember what it feels like to be truly seen and appreciated. Someone like who? For just a moment, her mask slipped. Joshua saw a flash of guilt, quickly covered by defensiveness. It's just theoretical, Josh. Don't read too much into it. After she went upstairs to shower, Joshua reopened his files. Melissa thought she was being subtle, but every word, every gesture confirmed what he already knew. She'd been thoroughly manipulated by a master craftsman, and she didn't even realize it. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We should meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone. VF. Vernon Farrell wanted a face-to-face meeting. Interesting. Joshua typed back. Why would I meet with someone who uses dead children to commit fraud? The response came quickly. Because I have something you want, and you have something I need. Let's be civilized about this. What could you possibly have that I want? Your wife's happiness. And her future. Don't you want what's best for Melissa? Joshua stared at the message, recognizing the psychological manipulation, even as he felt its impact. Vernon was positioning himself as Melissa's protector, implying that Joshua was the obstacle to her happiness. It was textbook emotional blackmail, but effective nonetheless. He spent the night planning his approach to the meeting. Vernon would expect him to be angry, desperate, maybe violent. Instead, Joshua would give him something unexpected, a worthy opponent who refused to be manipulated. Riverside Park at 2 p.m. was busy with joggers, families, and office workers on lunch break. Vernon had chosen the location well, public enough to prevent violence, but with enough ambient noise to ensure privacy. He was sitting on a bench near the river, reading a newspaper like he didn't have a care in the world. "Mr. Horn." Vernon stood as Joshua approached, extending his hand like they were old friends meeting for coffee. "Thank you for coming." Joshua ignored the handshake. "Let's get this over with." "Fair enough. I'll be direct." Vernon sat back down, completely relaxed. "Your marriage is over. Melissa doesn't love you anymore, hasn't for months. She's staying out of habit and financial security, but emotionally, she's already moved on. To you, to the idea of something better. I just happen to represent that possibility." Vernon's smile was cold, but not cruel. This was business to him. "I can make this ugly. Drag you through courts, destroy your reputation, take everything you've worked for. The Tyler situation was just a preview of what I can do. Or we handle this like gentlemen. You give Melissa an uncontested divorce with a generous settlement. She gets to start fresh with someone who appreciates her. You get to keep most of your assets and your dignity. Everyone wins." Joshua sat down on the bench, maintaining careful distance. "Except for your dead son. He definitely didn't win." For the first time, Vernon's composure cracked. "Tyler was an accident. A real accident. I just repurposed the situation. You used your own child's corpse as a prop in a con game. I used available resources to achieve a necessary outcome." Vernon's voice hardened. "Tyler was already dead. Nothing I did changed that. But his death could serve a purpose. Help me build a better life for the woman I love. You don't love her. She's a mark. You're wrong about that, Mr. Horn. Melissa is different. Special. She deserves better than a husband who treats her like a security asset to be protected instead of a woman to be cherished." The comment stung because it contained a grain of truth. Joshua's military background had made him protective to the point of being controlling. He'd always seen threats everywhere, had built his life like a fortress with Melissa safely inside. Maybe that hadn't left much room for romance or spontaneity. But that didn't justify what Vernon was doing. "Here's my counteroffer," Joshua said calmly. "You disappear. Today. Leave town, leave Melissa alone, and never contact either of us again. In exchange, I don't tell the police that you desecrated your son's corpse and committed multiple felonies in pursuit of an elaborate con game." Vernon laughed. "You think I'm afraid of the police? I've been very careful. No laws broken that can't be explained away as misunderstandings or coincidences. What about bribing Ernie Randall to impersonate a doctor?" "Ernie who?" "I don't know anyone by that name." "The rental car registered to Farrell Holdings?" "I rent a lot of cars. Can't keep track of them all." Vernon was right. He'd been careful. Everything could be explained away or denied. The only real evidence was Tyler's body, and that would just confirm that Vernon was a grieving father making poor decisions. "Then we have a problem," Joshua said, "because I'm not going anywhere, and neither is my marriage. Your marriage ended weeks ago, Mr. Horn. You just haven't accepted it yet." Vernon stood to leave. "I'll give you 48 hours to reconsider. After that, things get unpleasant for everyone involved." As Vernon walked away, Joshua remained on the bench, watching the river flow past. His opponent was smart, careful, and completely ruthless. The kind of enemy who required special tactics. That evening, Melissa was unusually affectionate over dinner, asking about his day, sharing stories from her book club, acting like the loving wife she'd always been. But Joshua now recognized it for what it was: guilt management. She was easing her conscience by being extra kind before she destroyed their life together. "I've been thinking," she said as they cleaned up the kitchen. "Maybe we should take a vacation. Get away from work and stress. Just focus on each other for a while." "Where did you have in mind?" "I don't know. Somewhere romantic. Paris, maybe, or that place in Tuscany you showed me in the travel magazine. A farewell tour." Vernon had probably suggested it. One last romantic trip before she filed for divorce. It would make her feel less guilty about what came next. "That sounds wonderful," Joshua said, pulling her into his arms. "Let's do it." She smiled and kissed him, and for just a moment, he almost believed it was real. But as they went upstairs together, Joshua's mind was already working on his counter-strategy. Vernon Farrell thought he was playing chess with an amateur. He was about to discover that Joshua Horn played by different rules entirely. Chapter 4. The Art of War. 3 days later, Joshua sat at his office reviewing intelligence reports like he was planning a military operation, which, in a way, he was. Vernon Farrell had declared war on his marriage and his life. Now it was time to return the favor. The first principle of asymmetric warfare was to never fight on your enemy's chosen battleground. Vernon expected Joshua to react emotionally, to confront Melissa, to lash out, to make mistakes driven by anger and heartbreak. Instead, Joshua was going to be cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless. Pablo Finley knocked on the office door and entered carrying a thick file folder. "You're not going to like what I found, but you need to know." "How bad is it?" "Vernon's been busy since you met with him. He filed a wrongful death lawsuit against you yesterday, claiming you're Tyler's father and seeking damages for abandonment and emotional distress. He's also initiated proceedings to have Tyler's body examined for DNA evidence." Joshua felt a chill. Can he do that legally? With the right court order, yes. And he's got a lawyer who specializes in paternity cases. The whole thing is designed to create public scandal and legal bills that will bleed you dry even if you eventually win. What about Melissa? Pablo's expression darkened. She filed a temporary restraining order this morning, claiming you've been emotionally abusive and she fears for her safety. It's complete fiction, but it gets you out of your own house and freezes access to joint assets. The brilliance of Vernon's strategy was becoming clear. While Joshua had been planning his response, Vernon had been implementing a coordinated legal attack designed to isolate and impoverish his target. Classic manipulation: create a crisis, then position yourself as the solution. "There's more," Pablo continued. "I ran a deeper background check on Vernon. Turns out he's done this exact same playbook 5 times in the past 10 years. Always targets successful men with assets and no children. Always uses legal warfare to destroy their finances while positioning himself as the wrong party or the protective new boyfriend. What happened to his previous targets? 2 suicides, 1 bankruptcy and disappeared. 1 moved to another country. 1 ended up in a mental institution. Vernon's got a perfect record of destroying lives." Joshua studied the photographs of Vernon's previous victims. They were all successful, intelligent men who'd been reduced to broken shells of their former selves. Men who'd fought Vernon's war using conventional tactics and lost everything. But here's the interesting part, Pablo continued. In each case, Vernon eventually tired of his new conquest and moved on to the next target. The wives he rescued all ended up abandoned within 2 years, usually after he'd gained control of whatever assets remained. So Melissa's not his endgame. She's just another stepping stone. Exactly. Which means he doesn't actually care about her. She's just a useful tool for getting to your money. That changed everything. Joshua had been operating under the assumption that Vernon genuinely wanted Melissa for herself. But if she was just another mark in a long-term pattern, then Vernon's emotional investment was minimal. That created opportunities. "I need you to do something for me, Pablo. Completely off the books. What do you need?" "I want surveillance on Vernon. 24 hours a day for the next week. I need to know his patterns, his contacts, his weaknesses. And I need to know if he's already scouting his next target." "Josh, that's expensive and time-consuming. And technically illegal without a warrant. I'll pay for it myself. And I'll take full responsibility if anything goes wrong." Pablo studied his friend's face. "You're planning something. I'm planning to win." That afternoon, Joshua received a call from his lawyer confirming what Pablo had already told him. The legal attacks were comprehensive and well orchestrated. Fighting them conventionally would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and take years, during which Vernon would be free to continue his manipulation. But Joshua wasn't planning to fight conventionally. Instead, he called Vernon directly. "Mr. Farrell, it's Joshua Horn. I'd like to discuss your offer. I'm glad you're seeing reason, Mr. Horn. Are you ready to be sensible about the divorce settlement? I think we can work something out, but I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you meet me tonight?" "Of course." "Where?" "My office. Horn Security Consulting on 5th Street. Come alone." Vernon's laugh was confident. I don't think you're in a position to make demands, Mr. Horn. Your wife is terrified of you. The courts are freezing your assets, and you're facing a wrongful death lawsuit that will destroy whatever reputation you have left. Then you have nothing to fear from meeting with a broken man in his empty office. There was a pause. Vernon was calculating, trying to read the tone, the implications. Fine. 8 o'clock. But if this is some kind of trap, what could I possibly do to hurt you? You've already won. Joshua spent the remaining hours preparing his office for the meeting. Hidden cameras, audio recording equipment, and most importantly, a complete psychological profile of Vernon Farrell based on his previous victims and their testimonies. Vernon arrived precisely at 8, dressed in an expensive suit and radiating confidence. He looked around the office approvingly, awards on the walls, photos of Joshua's military service, evidence of a successful career he was about to lose. Nice setup, Vernon said. Shame you're going to have to liquidate it all to pay your legal bills. About that, Joshua said, gesturing for Vernon to sit. I've been thinking about what you said. About Melissa deserving better. About the futility of fighting your legal campaign. And, you're right. I can't win a war of attrition against someone with your resources and patience. And more importantly, I can't force my wife to love me if she doesn't. Vernon's smile was triumphant. I'm glad you're being realistic. But I have a proposition. A way we can both get what we want without destroying each other in the process. I'm listening. Joshua leaned back in his chair, adopting a defeated posture. You want Melissa and my assets. I want to salvage what's left of my life and start over somewhere else. What if we could arrange that without the messy publicity of multiple lawsuits? What are you suggesting? A private settlement. I give Melissa an uncontested divorce with a generous settlement, say 60% of our joint assets. You drop the wrongful death lawsuit. Everyone walks away intact. Vernon considered this. What's the catch? No catch. Just one condition. I want to understand how you did it. Professional curiosity. You outplayed me completely, and I'd like to know how. Vernon's ego couldn't resist. For the next hour, he laid out his entire operation. How he'd researched Joshua's background, identified Melissa as the perfect access point, orchestrated their first accidental meeting at her gym, spent weeks building trust and emotional dependence. The key is patience, Vernon explained. Most men rush the seduction, try to move too fast. But Melissa needed to feel like she was making the choice herself. I just created the conditions where betraying you felt like the logical thing to do. And the dead son angle? That was inspired by something I read about military psychology. Soldiers are trained to respond to distress calls, to protect civilians in danger. I knew you'd respond to a call about a dying child, even if it didn't make logical sense. It was supposed to establish paternity so I could claim you abandoned Tyler and owed damages. Except I didn't sign the papers. A minor setback. The lawsuit still creates financial pressure and public scandal. By the time it's resolved, you'll be broke and Melissa will be married to someone else. Vernon was so pleased with his own cleverness that he didn't notice Joshua's growing smile. There's just one thing I don't understand, Joshua said. Why Melissa? Why not target someone with more assets and fewer complications? Honestly, she was supposed to be practice. A smaller target to refine my technique before going after someone really wealthy. Vernon shrugged. But then I realized she had qualities I valued beyond just the money. She's intelligent, beautiful, sophisticated. I decided to keep her. For how long? What do you mean? Your previous targets. You discarded their wives within 2 years. What makes Melissa different? For the first time, Vernon looked uncomfortable. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah Kemp in Denver. Monica Weeks in Phoenix. Catherine Peterson in Seattle. Should I continue? The confident smile faded from Vernon's face. You've been investigating me. Of course I have. Did you think I'd just roll over and accept defeat? Joshua stood up, and suddenly the dynamic in the room shifted. You made one crucial mistake, Vernon. You assumed I was just another suburban husband who would collapse under pressure. But I'm not. What are you? I'm a former military intelligence officer who specializes in psychological warfare and strategic deception. Everything you've done to me, every manipulation, every legal maneuver, every emotional attack. I've used those same techniques against enemy combatants. The only difference is that my targets usually ended up dead. Vernon stood up quickly, backing toward the door. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. For the past hour, you've been confessing to multiple felonies while being recorded by hidden cameras and microphones. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy, desecration of a corpse. Should I continue? Those recordings would never hold up in court. You didn't inform me I was being recorded. I don't need them to hold up in court. I just need them to destroy your reputation and expose your pattern of behavior to your current and future victims. Vernon's face went pale. What do you want? I want you to understand that this isn't a game you can win. I want you to realize that you picked the wrong target. And I want you to start running. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. Your financial records, your previous victims, your systematic destruction of marriages and lives. I can connect you to every crime you've committed and every life you've destroyed. Joshua moved closer, and Vernon pressed back against the door. But more importantly, I can make sure that every woman you try to target in the future knows exactly what you are. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. Vernon fumbled for the door handle and fled, leaving behind the confident predator persona and revealing the coward underneath. Joshua sat back down at his desk and made a phone call. Pablo, it's time for Phase 2. Chapter 5, The Unraveling. The next morning, Melissa called Joshua at his office, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. We need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee? I thought you had a restraining order against me. I'm dropping it. There are complications. They met at a neutral location, a busy Starbucks downtown where public scrutiny would prevent any dramatic scenes. Melissa looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by dark circles under her eyes and trembling hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Vernon's been arrested, she said without preamble. Joshua feigned surprise. For what? Fraud. Identity theft. Something about a fake doctor and forged medical records. She looked up at him with confused, hurt eyes. Josh, what is going on? Vernon said you two had worked everything out, that you were going to give me an uncontested divorce. Then, this morning the police came to his apartment and arrested him. Maybe there's more to Vernon than you realized. Don't play games with me. I know you had something to do with this. Her voice carried a mixture of anger and desperation. The police are asking me questions about our relationship, about what Vernon told me about you, about whether I knew he wasn't really a doctor. Joshua studied his wife's face, looking for any sign that she understood the depth of Vernon's deception. What he saw instead was a woman clinging to her last illusions about a man who had systematically manipulated her for months. What did you tell them? The truth. That Vernon is a good man who was trying to help me get out of an unhappy marriage. That whatever he did wrong, it was probably because he was trying to protect me from you. The loyalty in her voice was heartbreaking because it was so misplaced. Vernon had convinced her that Joshua was the villain in their story, and she was still defending her manipulator even after his arrest. Melissa, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Vernon Farrell is not who you think he is. Oh, and you're going to tell me who he really is? The man who's been ignoring me for months, who treats our marriage like a business arrangement, who's so paranoid about security that I feel like I'm living in a prison. Her words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Joshua's military background had made him protective to the point of being controlling. He'd prioritized their physical safety and financial security over emotional intimacy, and that had created the vulnerability Vernon had exploited. You're right about some of that, he admitted. I haven't been the husband you needed, but that doesn't make Vernon the solution. At least Vernon sees me as a woman instead of an asset to be protected. Joshua pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between them. Vernon has destroyed 5 marriages in the past 10 years. He targets successful men, seduces their wives, then uses legal warfare to steal their assets. Once he's taken everything, he abandons the women and moves on to the next target. Melissa stared at the folder without opening it. I don't believe you. Sarah Kemp thought her husband was emotionally abusive too. So did Monica Weeks and Catherine Peterson. They all thought Vernon was their knight in shining armor, right up until he disappeared with their money and left them with nothing. You're lying. The police reports are all in there. Testimony from his previous victims. Financial records showing his pattern of behavior. Vernon isn't in love with you, Melissa. You're just his current mark. She opened the folder with shaking hands and began reading. Joshua watched the color drain from her face as she absorbed the evidence. Photographs of Vernon with other women, court documents from previous lawsuits, testimonials from wives who'd been abandoned after Vernon had achieved his financial objectives. This can't be real, she whispered. There's more. Vernon's son, the one who died in the motorcycle accident. He's been using that boy's death as a weapon against me. He transported the body illegally, hired a fake doctor to trick me into signing paternity papers. Also, he could file a wrongful death lawsuit and destroy me financially. Melissa looked up from the documents, her eyes filled with tears. He used his own child's death. He told me Tyler was just available resources to achieve his objectives. That's how he sees everything, people, relationships, even his own family. Just tools to be used and discarded. The full scope of her betrayal was sinking in now. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been completely manipulated by a predator who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. Josh, I'm so sorry. I believed. You believed what he wanted you to believe. That's what makes him dangerous. How did I not see it? How was I so blind? Joshua reached across the table and took her hand. The first time he'd touched her with genuine tenderness in months. Because he's very good at what he does. And because our marriage had real problems that made you vulnerable to his manipulation. They sat in silence for several minutes while Melissa processed the devastating revelation that the man she'd fallen in love with was a professional con artist who'd never cared about her at all. What happens now? She finally asked. Now you decide what you want. If you want a divorce, I'll give you one. If you want to try to rebuild our marriage, I'm willing to do the work. But first, we need to make sure Vernon pays for what he's done. How? The police have enough evidence to convict him on fraud charges, but that's just the beginning. I've been in contact with his previous victims, and they're all willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. We can make sure he goes to prison for a very long time. Melissa nodded slowly. I want to help. I want to make this right. It's going to be difficult. The media will probably pick up the story, and you'll have to testify about the affair, about the things Vernon told you about me. Are you prepared for that? I deserve whatever consequences come from this. I betrayed you. I betrayed our marriage, and I helped a predator try to destroy an innocent man. She looked directly into his eyes. I know you might never forgive me, and I understand if you don't want to try to save our marriage. But I want you to know that what I felt for Vernon wasn't real. It was manufactured, manipulated. What we had together, that was real, even if I lost sight of it. For the first time in weeks, Joshua felt a spark of hope. The woman he'd married was still there, underneath the confusion and manipulation. Whether they could rebuild their relationship remained to be seen, but at least now they were both fighting the same enemy. There's something else you need to know, he said. Vernon's not done. He's lost this round, but he's facing serious prison time. Desperate people do desperate things. As if summoned by his words, Joshua's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You took everything from me. Now I'm going to take everything from you. He showed the message to Melissa, who went pale. Is he threatening us? He's threatening me. But you're with me now, which makes you a target too. Joshua's military training was already shifting into high alert mode. Vernon Farrell was no longer playing a long-term con game. He was in immediate crisis mode, which made him far more dangerous and unpredictable. What do? We finish this. Once and for all. Chapter 6. The Desperate Gambit. Vernon Farrell made bail within 24 hours, his expensive lawyer arguing successfully that he was a flight risk but not a danger to the community. It was a tactical error by the prosecution that Joshua had expected. The legal system wasn't designed to handle sophisticated psychological predators who operated within technical legal boundaries. But Joshua wasn't constrained by legal boundaries. Pablo Finley called him at midnight with disturbing news. Vernon's not at his apartment. My surveillance team lost him 3 hours ago. His car's still in the parking garage, but he's gone. Any idea where he might go? He's got contacts all over the country from his previous operations. Could be anywhere. But Josh, there's something else. We found evidence that he's been planning something big, rental agreements for industrial equipment, cash withdrawals from multiple accounts, purchases of chemicals and electronics. What kind of chemicals? The kind that explode. Joshua felt ice in his veins. Vernon had shifted from psychological warfare to physical violence, which meant everyone in Joshua's life was now at risk. Where's Melissa? Safe house, like you requested. But she's asking to see you. Absolutely not. Vernon might be watching for exactly that kind of movement. But even as he said it, Joshua knew that hiding wasn't a long-term solution. Vernon was smart, patient, and now completely desperate. He would find a way to strike, and when he did, Joshua wanted to be ready. The call came at 3 a.m., Vernon's voice distorted by some kind of electronic device. You destroyed my life, Joshua, my business, my reputation, my future. All for what? A cheating wife who never loved you anyway. Where are you, Vernon? Close enough to matter. Far enough to stay safe. For now, what do you want? I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Your business, your assets, your sense of security. But most of all, I want you to know what it's like to be responsible for someone else's death. The line went dead. Joshua immediately called Pablo. He's going to target someone close to me. We need to expand protection to everyone, my employees, my friends, anyone he might see as leverage. Already on it. But Josh, we can't protect everyone forever. This guy's got to make a move soon, and when he does, we need to be ready. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to give Vernon what he wants, a chance to destroy me personally. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Joshua would make himself vulnerable, create an irresistible target that Vernon couldn't ignore, then turn the trap around on his hunter. It required him to become bait in his own snare, but it was the only way to end this without more innocent people getting hurt. He sent a message to Vernon through a secure channel that he knew his enemy was monitoring. You want to finish this? Meet me tomorrow night, 11 p.m., at the old Riverside Industrial Complex. Come alone, and we'll settle this once and for all. The response came within minutes, finally showing some courage. See you there. The Riverside Industrial Complex was an abandoned manufacturing plant on the outskirts of town, isolated, dark, with multiple entry and exit points. Perfect for Vernon's purposes, which was exactly why Joshua had chosen it. He spent the day preparing, placing hidden cameras and motion sensors throughout the complex, studying the layout, identifying potential weapons and escape routes. Pablo argued for a full SWAT presence, but Joshua overruled him. Vernon's too smart for a conventional police operation. He'll see it coming and disappear. This has to look like a personal confrontation between the two of us. And if he really has explosives, if this is some kind of murder-suicide scenario, then I'll deal with it. But I don't think that's his endgame. Vernon's a predator, not a martyr. He wants to win, not just hurt me. That evening, Melissa called from the safe house. Don't do this, Josh. Let the police handle it. The police had their chance. They let him make bail, and now he's escalated to threats of violence. This ends tonight, one way or another. I can't lose you. Not after everything we've been through, everything I've done wrong. Please, you're not going to lose me. Vernon's good at manipulation and long-term planning, but he's not a soldier. I've been in actual combat against enemies who are trying to kill me. One desperate con artist isn't going to be my downfall. Promise me you'll come home. I promise. At 10:45 p.m., Joshua entered the abandoned industrial complex alone. His phone, his weapons, his recording equipment, everything was in place. Hidden throughout the building were Pablo's surveillance teams, positioned to observe but not interfere unless Joshua's life was in immediate danger. Vernon was already there, waiting in the main assembly area like a spider in the center of its web. He looked different, disheveled, manic, no longer the polished predator Joshua had faced before. You came, Vernon said. I wasn't sure you would. I keep my word. Unlike some people. The moral high ground. How does it feel up there, Joshua? Does it make you feel superior to those of us who have to claw our way through life? It feels better than being a parasite who destroys families for money. Vernon laughed, but there was no humor in it. Families? You mean like the family I lost because of you? Tyler's dead. My business is ruined, and the woman I love thinks I'm a monster. All because you couldn't accept that your wife didn't want you anymore. Melissa was never the real target, and we both know it. You were using her to get to my assets, just like you used all the others. Maybe at first, but it became more than that. She made me want to be better, to build something real instead of just taking from others. Vernon's voice carried genuine pain. And you destroyed that. For a moment, Joshua almost felt sympathy for his enemy. Almost. You destroyed it yourself when you chose to use your dead son as a weapon. Whatever feelings you had for Melissa became irrelevant the moment you decided to desecrate Tyler's body to further your con game. Vernon's face twisted with rage. Don't you dare judge me. Tyler was my son, and I'll use his death however I see fit. He never gave me anything in life. At least in death he could serve a purpose. And there's the real Vernon Farrell. Not the grieving father or the love-struck suitor, but a sociopath who sees his own child as a tool to be used. We're all tools, Joshua. The only question is whether we're willing to use ourselves and others to get what we want. You pretend to be noble, but you've killed people. I've read your military record. How many men died because of your decisions? The difference is that I killed enemies who were trying to harm innocent people. You destroy innocence to serve your own greed. Innocence like your precious Melissa? She betrayed you willingly. I didn't force her into my bed. She came there because you weren't man enough to keep her satisfied. The words were designed to provoke an emotional response, to make Joshua angry and careless. Instead, they confirmed what he already suspected. Vernon was no longer thinking strategically. He was operating on pure emotion, which made him predictable. Is that why you brought me here? To gloat about sleeping with my wife. I brought you here to offer you a choice. Walk away. Leave town tonight. Never contact Melissa again, and I'll let you live. Stay, and I'll destroy everything you care about, starting with you. And if I refuse? Vernon reached into his jacket and pulled out a detonator device. Then we both die tonight, along with anyone else who gets in my way. I've rigged this entire building with explosives. One button push, and it all comes down. Joshua studied the device, his military training automatically analyzing the threat. The detonator looked real, and Vernon had certainly had time to plan explosives throughout the building. But something felt wrong about the scenario. You're bluffing. Am I? Are you willing to bet your life on that assessment? I'm willing to bet my life that you're not suicidal. Everything you've done has been about improving your position, gaining assets, building a better life. Blowing yourself up doesn't accomplish any of those objectives. Maybe my objectives have changed. Maybe destroying you is worth dying for. But even as he said it, Vernon was backing toward an exit door, not the behavior of someone planning to detonate himself along with his enemy. The explosives are real, Joshua said, working through the logic. But you're not planning to die with me. You've got an escape route planned. Push the button, run for the exit. Hope you get far enough away before the building comes down. Vernon's smile confirmed the analysis. You always were too smart for your own good. Just smart enough. Pablo. Vernon spun around as Detective Pablo Finley and his SWAT team emerged from concealment, weapons drawn and trained on the desperate fugitive. Drop the detonator, Vernon. It's over. You brought the police? Vernon looked genuinely surprised. I thought this was between us. It stopped being between us when you threatened to kill innocent people. Now drop the device and surrender. Vernon looked around the room, calculating odds, looking for options. The SWAT team had him completely surrounded with no possible escape route. You know what the funny thing is? He said, still holding the detonator. I really did love her. Melissa. Not at first, but eventually. She made me remember what it felt like to want something more than just money and power. Then prove it, Joshua said. Surrender. Don't make her watch the man she cared about die in a pointless last stand. The man she cared about is already dead, killed by you when you expose what I really was. Vernon looked directly at Joshua, smiled sadly, and pressed the button. Nothing happened. Military demolitions training. Joshua explained as the SWAT team tackled Vernon to the ground. I spent 2 hours this afternoon disarming your explosives. Pretty good work for an amateur, but you used commercial-grade materials with standard timers. Child's play for someone who's defused actual terrorist bombs. As they handcuffed Vernon and read him his rights, he looked up at Joshua with something that might have been respect. "You won," he said simply. "We all lost," Joshua replied. "The only question is whether we can salvage something from the wreckage." Chapter 7. Rebuilding from Ashes. 3 months later, Joshua sat in his office reading the final report on Vernon Farrell's trial. Guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, desecration of human remains, and attempted murder. The judge had sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison, ensuring that he would never again destroy another family. The victory felt hollow. His business had survived the scandal, even thrived as clients appreciated his personal experience dealing with sophisticated threats. The media attention had actually increased demand for his security consulting services. Financially, he was better off than he'd been before Vernon entered their lives. But the real damage wasn't financial, it was personal. Melissa knocked on his office door, entering hesitantly when he gestured her inside. They'd been living separately since the trial ended, both needing space to process the trauma and betrayal of the past year. "How are you doing?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Better than I expected. Worse than I'd hoped." "You?" "About the same." She was quiet for a moment, studying her hands. "I've been seeing Dr. Schwartz twice a week, working through everything that happened, trying to understand how I let myself be so completely manipulated." Dr. Susie Schwartz was a therapist who specialized in helping victims of psychological manipulation recover their sense of reality and self-worth. She'd been working with all of Vernon's previous targets, helping them understand that they weren't weak or stupid, just human beings who'd encountered a master predator. What does she say? That Vernon spent months studying me, learning my vulnerabilities, crafting a perfect psychological profile of what I needed to hear. Every word, every gesture, every moment of seeming spontaneity was calculated to make me feel like I was making my own choices while actually following a script. Joshua nodded. He'd read the FBI's psychological evaluation of Vernon, which painted a picture of a brilliant sociopath with an instinctive understanding of human weakness. The man was essentially a human algorithm designed to exploit emotional vulnerabilities. Does that make it easier to forgive yourself? A little. But understanding why I did something doesn't erase the fact that I did it. I betrayed you, I betrayed our marriage, and I almost helped him destroy everything you'd built. Her voice caught slightly. I have to live with that. We both made mistakes. I was so focused on providing security and stability that I forgot to provide emotional intimacy. I treated our marriage like a military operation instead of a relationship between two people who loved each other. You were protecting us, providing for us, being responsible. Those aren't crimes. They're not crimes, but they're not enough either. A marriage needs more than just security and financial stability. It needs connection, romance, spontaneity, all the things I was too rigid to provide. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Two people who'd been through hell together and were trying to find their way back to each other. Dr. Schwartz says that trauma can either destroy a relationship or make it stronger, Melissa said finally. It depends on whether both people are willing to do the work to rebuild trust and intimacy. Are you willing? I want to be, but I don't know if you can ever really forgive me or trust me again. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness after what I put you through. Joshua got up from his desk and moved to the window, looking out at the city where he'd built his business and his life. A year ago, everything had seemed secure, predictable, under control. Now he understood how fragile those illusions had been. I've been thinking about what Vernon said that night in the warehouse. About me killing people in the military, about the moral differences between his violence and mine. Josh, you can't compare. Let me finish. He was right that I've killed people. And some of those people might have been decent human beings who were just fighting for their country or their beliefs, same as I was. War makes killers of everyone involved. That's completely different from what Vernon did. Is it? I destroyed lives in service of what I believed was a greater good. Vernon destroyed lives in service of his personal desires. Both of us use violence and deception to achieve our objectives. The only difference is that society approved of my violence. Melissa stood up and moved beside him at the window. The difference is that you protected innocent people. Vernon preyed on them. You served something larger than yourself. He served only himself. You carried the weight of what you had to do. He enjoyed it. Maybe, or maybe I'm just better at justifying my actions. Josh, you're a good man. A flawed man, like all of us, but fundamentally decent and moral. Vernon was a predator who felt no empathy for his victims. Don't let his manipulations make you doubt who you are. He turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time in months. She looked older, more serious, marked by the trauma they both endured. But there was something else there too, a depth and strength that hadn't been there before. Dr. Schwartz says I need to stop defining myself by my worst decision, Melissa continued, that I'm more than just the woman who had an affair. I'm also the woman who chose to help expose Vernon when I learned the truth. The woman who testified against him in court. The woman who's doing the hard work to understand herself and become better. And what do you want to be now? I want to be your wife again, if you'll have me. Not the naive woman who was vulnerable to manipulation, but someone stronger, more aware, more committed to the hard work of maintaining a real relationship. Joshua reached out and took her hand, the same hand that had once worn a fake wedding ring on a dead man's finger, the same hand that had signed fake medical documents, the same hand that had betrayed everything they'd built together. It won't be easy. Rebuilding trust, learning to be vulnerable with each other again, dealing with the public scrutiny and media attention. I know, but I think we're both stronger than we were before. We've seen what happens when a marriage becomes complacent, when two people stop really seeing each other. Maybe we can use that knowledge to build something better. Dr. Schwartz is helping you. Who's helping me? Melissa smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. I was hoping we could help each other. That evening, they went to dinner at a small restaurant across town, somewhere they'd never been together before. A place with no memories of their previous life, where they could start creating new ones. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything they'd been through, the betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the media circus that had followed. But more importantly, they talked about what they'd learned about themselves and each other. I realize now that I married you partly because you felt safe, Melissa admitted. You were strong, successful, protective, everything my father wasn't. But somewhere along the way, safe became boring, predictable. And I married you partly because you represented everything I'd been fighting to protect, Joshua replied. Home, family, innocence, beauty. But I forgot that you were a real person with your own needs and desires, not just a symbol of the life I wanted to build. So where does that leave us? Starting over, not as the people we were before, but as the people we've become because of what we've been through. They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked through the city streets hand in hand, two survivors of a war they'd never expected to fight. There's something else, Melissa said as they reached their car. Dr. Schwartz wants to meet with both of us together. Couples therapy, to help us navigate rebuilding our relationship. Are you ready for that? I'm ready to try. The question is whether you're ready to forgive me enough to do the work. Joshua stopped walking and turned to face her. I forgave you the moment I realized you'd been manipulated by a professional predator. The question isn't whether I can forgive you. It's whether we can build something new from the pieces of what we lost. And I think we can. I think we have to. Because the alternative is letting Vernon win, even from prison. They kissed then, on a quiet street corner under the city lights. Two people who'd lost everything and found each other again in the wreckage. Chapter 8. The New Foundation. 6 months into their reconciliation, Joshua and Melissa were learning that rebuilding a marriage was harder than starting one from scratch. Every conversation carried the weight of their history. Every gesture had to be evaluated for sincerity. Every disagreement triggered fears about the stability of their renewed commitment. But they were making progress. Dr. Schwartz says we're in the hypervigilance phase, Melissa explained over breakfast. We're both so afraid of making the same mistakes that we're overanalyzing every interaction. Is that normal? Apparently. The goal is to eventually get to a place where we can trust our instincts again, where every conversation doesn't feel like a test. Joshua's phone buzzed with a text from Pablo. Need to see you. Important development in the Farrell case. They met at Murphy's Diner, their usual spot for sensitive conversations. Pablo looked troubled, which was never a good sign. Vernon's been communicating with someone on the outside, he said without preamble. Prison officials intercepted some coded messages that suggest he's trying to coordinate some kind of operation. What kind of operation? We're not sure yet, but the person he's been writing to is Shauna Valencia, the sister of one of his previous victims in Phoenix. Sarah Kemp, the woman who killed herself after Vernon destroyed her marriage. Joshua felt ice forming in his chest. She blames me for Vernon's conviction. Gets worse. Shauna's been researching you, Melissa, your business, your daily routines. She's also been in contact with other family members of Vernon's victims, people who think he was wrongly convicted, that he was just a man in love who got caught up in a vindictive ex-husband's revenge plot. They think I framed him. Vernon's been very persuasive from prison. He's painted himself as the victim of a military-industrial conspiracy, claimed you used your government connections to manufacture evidence against him. Some people are buying it. The irony was staggering. Vernon was still manipulating people, even from behind bars, turning his own victims' families against the man who'd exposed him. How dangerous is this Shauna Valencia? Unknown. No criminal record, but she's been making threats on social media about justice for Vernon and exposing the truth about Joshua Horn. We're watching her, but she hasn't done anything illegal yet. Joshua thanked Pablo and drove home, his mind already shifting into threat assessment mode. Vernon's reach was longer than they'd realized, his ability to manipulate people undiminished by incarceration. That evening, he sat down with Melissa to explain the situation. So even in prison, he's still trying to hurt us, she said quietly. It's what he does. He finds people's vulnerabilities and exploits them. The families of his previous victims are vulnerable because they're grieving, looking for someone to blame. What do? We stay alert. We vary our routines. We trust our instincts if something feels wrong. He took her hand, and we don't let fear control our lives. That would be letting him win. 2 weeks later, the threat materialized in an unexpected way. Joshua was leaving his office late on a Thursday evening when a woman approached him in the parking garage. She was attractive, well-dressed, and looked familiar in a way that triggered his combat instincts. Mr. Horn? I'm Shauna Valencia. I think we need to talk. Joshua's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon, but Shauna raised both hands to show they were empty. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I think we've both been lied to. By whom? By Vernon Farrell, among others. She looked nothing like what Joshua had expected based on Pablo's briefings. Instead of an angry, grieving sister seeking revenge, she appeared calm, intelligent, and genuinely troubled. You've been investigating Vernon's claims about me, he said. I have, and what I found doesn't match what he told me. She pulled out a tablet and showed him a screen filled with documents. Vernon said you manufactured evidence against him, that you used government connections to frame him for crimes he didn't commit. And the evidence is real. All of it. The DNA tests, the financial records, the testimony from previous victims. It's all genuine. Vernon Farrell really did destroy my sister's marriage, really did steal her assets, and really did abandon her when she had nothing left to take. Joshua studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. What he saw instead was a woman grappling with painful truths about someone she trusted. Then why are you here? Because I need to understand something. Vernon claims he loved your wife, that what happened between them was real, not part of his usual pattern. Is that possible? The question caught Joshua off guard. In all his analysis of Vernon's motivations, he'd never seriously considered whether the man might have developed genuine feelings for Melissa. What difference would it make? It would mean he's capable of real emotion, that he's not just a sociopath who sees people as objects to be used. Why does that matter to you? Shauna's composure finally cracked, revealing the pain underneath. Because if he's capable of love, then what he did to my sister was a choice, not a compulsion. It means he could have stopped, could have chosen differently, but he didn't care enough about the damage he was causing. Joshua understood now. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was seeking closure, trying to make sense of her sister's death. I think Vernon did develop feelings for Melissa, he said carefully. But that didn't change his fundamental nature. He still lied to her, still manipulated her, still planned to abandon her once he'd achieved his financial objectives. How can you be sure? Because when I confronted him, when he thought he was about to die, he told me the truth. Melissa was supposed to be practiced for bigger targets. He kept her because she had qualities he valued, but she was still just a possession to him. Something to be owned, not cherished. Shauna nodded slowly. That's what I was afraid of. Sarah thought she'd found someone who truly saw her, who valued her for who she was. But she was just another mark. Your sister wasn't stupid or weak. Vernon is a professional manipulator. What happened to her could have happened to anyone. Thank you for that. And thank you for stopping him before he could destroy more families. As Shauna walked away, Joshua realized that Vernon's manipulation had extended even to this conversation. The man had probably anticipated that his victims' families would eventually investigate his claims, had probably counted on someone like Shauna seeking out the truth and ultimately validating Joshua's actions. Even his failures were calculated to achieve secondary objectives. That night, Joshua shared the encounter with Melissa during their evening therapy session with Dr. Schwartz. It sounds like you handled that very well, the therapist observed. You recognized a potential threat, stayed alert to danger, but remained open to the possibility that she was genuinely seeking understanding. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Melissa admitted. For Vernon to find some new way to hurt us from prison. That hypervigilance we discussed, Dr. Schwartz said. It's normal after trauma, but it can become its own prison if you let it control your lives. So how do we move past it? By choosing to trust despite the risks. By building something positive instead of just defending against potential threats. After the session, Joshua and Melissa walked through the park where Vernon had once tried to manipulate him into surrendering his marriage. I've been thinking about what Dr. Schwartz said, Melissa said, about building something positive. What did you have in mind? I want to help other women who've been manipulated by predators like Vernon. Maybe volunteer with victim services or speak at support groups. That could be re-traumatizing for you. Or it could be healing. Taking something terrible that happened to me and using it to help others avoid the same fate. Joshua considered this. His own recovery from combat trauma had been helped by working with other veterans, sharing experiences and coping strategies. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but I think there's value in letting women know that being manipulated doesn't make you weak or stupid. That predators like Vernon are skilled professionals who can fool almost anyone. And what about us? Our marriage? I think helping other people might actually strengthen what we're building. Give us a shared purpose beyond just repairing our own damage. That night, for the first time since their reconciliation began, they made love without hesitation, without the weight of the past overwhelming the possibility of the future. Afterwards, lying in each other's arms, Melissa voiced what they were both thinking. We're going to be okay, aren't we? Better than okay, Joshua replied. We're going to be stronger than we ever were before. Outside their bedroom window, the city lights twinkled like stars, illuminating a world full of both predators and protectors, victims and survivors, endings and new beginnings. Chapter 9. Victory and New Beginnings. 1 year later, Joshua stood before a packed auditorium at the National Conference on Domestic Abuse and Psychological Manipulation. In the audience sat law enforcement officials, social workers, therapists, and survivors, people who understood that emotional violence could be just as devastating as physical assault. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you about a predator you might not recognize, he began. Vernon Farrell never raised a hand against his victims. He never threatened them directly. By most legal definitions, he wasn't even a criminal until we caught him desecrating his son's corpse and committing identity fraud. The audience was silent, attentive. But in the span of 10 years, Vernon destroyed 8 marriages, drove 2 people to suicide, caused 3 nervous breakdowns, and stole over $4 million in assets. He was a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a charming businessman. Joshua clicked to the next slide, showing Vernon's photograph alongside images of his victims. The reason he was so successful wasn't because his targets were weak or naive. It was because he understood something that most of us don't want to acknowledge. Every person alive has vulnerabilities that can be exploited by someone with enough skill and patience. In the front row, Melissa watched her husband with pride and admiration. Over the past year, they'd rebuilt their marriage into something stronger and more honest than it had ever been before. But more than that, they found a shared mission in helping other people recognize and resist psychological manipulation. My wife Melissa will tell you that she's not a weak woman, Joshua continued. She's intelligent, educated, successful in her own career. But Vernon spent months studying her, learning her insecurities, crafting a perfect psychological profile designed to make her question her marriage and seek comfort in his arms. Melissa stood up at his gesture, addressing the audience. I want you to understand something, she said. When I met Vernon Farrell, I didn't think I was vulnerable to manipulation. I thought I could recognize a con artist. But Vernon didn't present himself as a con artist. He presented himself as everything I didn't realize I was missing in my marriage. Her voice carried the hard-earned wisdom of someone who'd survived hell and chosen to help others avoid the same fate. He made me feel seen, appreciated, understood. He listened to my complaints about my husband with perfect empathy. He validated every frustration, every doubt, every moment of loneliness I'd ever felt. And slowly, gradually, he convinced me that those feelings meant my marriage was fundamentally broken. She paused, looking directly at Joshua. What I didn't realize was that every marriage has moments of disconnection. Every person has insecurities and unmet needs. Vernon didn't create my vulnerabilities. He just found them and exploited them with surgical precision. After their presentation, they were approached by dozens of people, law enforcement officials who'd encountered similar cases, therapists working with manipulation victims, survivors who recognized their own stories in what they'd shared. One woman, elderly with kind eyes, introduced herself as Dr. Martha Taylor, a psychiatrist who specialized in treating sociopathic behavior. What you've described is textbook predatory manipulation, she told them. But what interests me is how you turn the tables on him. Most victims never recover their agency once they've been targeted by someone of Vernon's caliber. I had advantages, Joshua explained. Military training in psychological operations, experience recognizing deception and manipulation. I knew what I was dealing with. That's part of it. But I think there's something else. You chose to see your wife as a fellow victim rather than an enemy. That's remarkable, because most spouses in your situation focus their anger on the unfaithful partner rather than the manipulator. I was angry, Joshua admitted, but I recognized that she'd been professionally manipulated by an expert. Blaming her for falling victim to Vernon would be like blaming someone for being robbed by a master pickpocket. Dr. Taylor nodded approvingly. That's the key insight that most people miss. Predators like Vernon are skilled professionals. Their victims aren't stupid or weak. They're just human beings who encountered someone whose entire life was devoted to exploiting human psychology. That evening, Joshua and Melissa sat in their hotel room, reviewing emails from conference attendees. Law enforcement agencies wanted them to consult on similar cases. Victim services organizations wanted them to develop training programs. Publishers wanted them to write a book about their experience. Hard to believe how much good has come from something so terrible, Melissa observed. Vernon would probably be furious if he knew. His attempt to destroy our lives has turned into a platform for helping other people. Have you heard anything from Pablo about his appeals? All denied. The evidence was too overwhelming, and his pattern of behavior too clear. He'll serve at least 20 years before he's eligible for parole. Melissa was quiet for a moment. Do you ever feel sorry for him? Joshua considered the question seriously. Sometimes. He's clearly a damaged person who never learned to form genuine human connections. But then I think about Tyler, his own son, and how he used that boy's death as a weapon. Whatever trauma made Vernon into what he is, it doesn't excuse the choices he made. Dr. Schwartz says that understanding our enemies doesn't mean forgiving them. Smart woman. That's probably why our marriage survived. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Joshua checked the peephole and saw Pablo Finley standing in the hallway. Pablo, what are you doing here? Had to fly out for a conference anyway. Thought I'd stop by and see how your presentation went. He looked tired but satisfied. Also wanted to give you some news about Vernon. What kind of news? The kind you're going to like. One of his cellmates got tired of listening to him brag about manipulating women and decided to teach him some humility. Vernon's in the prison hospital with a broken jaw and 3 cracked ribs. Joshua felt no satisfaction in the news. Violence, even against someone like Vernon, wasn't justice. It was just more violence. Is he going to be okay? He'll recover. But apparently word has gotten around the prison about what he did to his victims. Child predators and guys who hurt women don't do well in general population. Maybe they'll move him to protective custody. Maybe. But here's the interesting part. The warden says Vernon's been different since the attack. Quieter. Less arrogant. Like maybe he's finally understanding that actions have consequences. After Pablo left, Joshua and Melissa sat together on the hotel balcony, looking out over the city lights. Do you think people like Vernon can change? Melissa asked. I don't know, but I know that people like us can. We've proven that trauma doesn't have to define us, that betrayal doesn't have to destroy us, that even the worst experiences can become the foundation for something better. When we first started therapy, I thought the goal was to get back to where we were before Vernon entered our lives. And now I realize that where we were before wasn't good enough. We were complacent, disconnected, taking each other for granted. What we have now is better, harder earned,